year is 1981. Walter Cronkite delivers his final news broadcast, Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats makes its Jellicle debut on the West End, and on June 12th of that summer, Steven Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark punches its way onto the silver screen.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, a film from Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
The sixth or seventh film by Steven Spielberg, depending if you count Firelight or not, would go on to dominate the box office, being in the top 10 for an unprecedented 42 weeks straight, along with catapulting Harrison Ford to a new level of movie stardom, and got the whole Indiana Express chugging along. A train that's packed full with 5 feature films, a shockingly dark TV show, comic books, novels, arcade and console games, a limited edition Whopper at Burger King, one really great Disneyland ride, a theme song by John Williams that you can hum in your sleep, legions of fans, and possibly its greatest achievement, being spoofed by Weird Al. The brainchild of Lucas and Spielberg arose from George's love for adventure serials from the 30s and 40s, but it quickly evolved into its own universe with an iconic character that has stood the test of time. But with all the ancient artifacts, whip cracks, death cults, greasers, spear traps, time travel, dangerous archaeology, exotic locales, horrific curses, jape snakes, apes, and dates,
bad dates.
You're probably wondering exactly how big the world of Indiana Jones and his many adventures is. At least I assume you're wondering that since you're watching this video. If you got here by accident somehow, please don't leave. I promise there will be a little treat for you at the end. The way this works is we're going to be hitching a ride with the good doctor as we travel through the chronological events of the Indiana Jones universe as they happen within the world of the films. From his days as a boy traveling the globe with his family, his odyssey through World War I, all the way through the space race and everything in between, which includes a lot of dead Nazis. Good stuff. We'll also be touching on some of the history behind the making of these films, as well as some of the real history that Indiana happens to stumble across during his very Forrest Gump-esque travels.
Ernie Hemingway from Chicago.
Indiana Jones.
It's a video about Indiana Jones. It would feel weird not to include a history lesson or 2 or 12. To properly chart this course, we're going to be relying on a couple different sources. The 5 films, of course, along with the television series, special features, cast and crew interviews, the Indiana Jones wikis and Reddits, some straight up history books as well as novels, comics, and the Ultimate Indiana Jones Guide by author James Luceno. A couple small caveats when it comes to the books that we'll be including in our timeline. We're mainly going to be using the Ultimate Guide and the dozen titles that were published under Bantam Books in the early 90s, along with the 2009 book Indiana Jones and the Army of the Dead by Delray Publishers. Some of the Young Indiana Jones novels are being omitted, however, because they're mostly choose-your-own-adventure novels that were adapted from the TV show. A few of those books will be included if they're important to introducing characters into the universe for the first time. I am aware that there were 8 novels written by author Wolfgang Holbein, which were published by Goldman Verlag in the early 90s. But if you couldn't tell by those names, all the novels are written in German, which I do not speak. From my research, I've gleaned that the Verlag novels mostly take place between 1939 to 1943. There's also a few French books and comics as well that aren't going to get much love either. Indiana Jones is a bit of an odd timeline to put together since the canon is pretty loosey-goosey outside of the films, with a good amount of the events I'll be talking about becoming retconned or put under the umbrella of canon when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was in production.
I rode with Pancho Villa, a couple of his guys spoke it.
Bullshit.
¿Quién es ese?
Este es el General Francisco Villa.
A decent amount of this, but not that. Similar to, but not as egregious as the Expanded Universe novels becoming Star Wars Legends, or whatever they are now. With that being said, I'm still going to do my best to tie all this history up in a nice little bow. That unfortunately means that the halftime show from 1995 will not be anywhere on this timeline. I highly recommend you go watch if you've never seen it before, because it's truly insane. Patti LaBelle is there, Tony Bennett seems super confused by what's going on, the Lombardi Trophy gets stolen, and it was all done to promote the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland.
Once again, we've turned an action movie into a live-action extravaganza.
Things also get a little wonky with the many different comic books, which were published by Marvel Comics in the 80s and then Dark Horse Comics in the 90s. And obviously there's going to be spoilers for everything Indiana Jones in this video. So if you somehow have gotten this far without any of these movies being spoiled for you and you want to avoid that, go ahead and close your eyes and turn your head before it's too late.
Don't look right! Keep your eyes shut!
Now with the overture out of the way, go grab your favorite fedora, pour yourself a little drink, and hold on tight as we explore the exciting world of Indiana Jones. We're going to kick this whole timeline off by going all the way back to July 1st, 1899, for the birth of Henry Walton Jones Jr. in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
They decided to name me after my father.
So I'm Henry Walton Jones Jr.
The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles is a very fun show to unpack if you're a fan of history, specifically the progressive era, which was from the 1890s to the end of the 1920s. The television series aired from 1992 to 1993 and was executive produced by George Lucas, with Rick McCallum serving as the show's lead producer. You might recognize Rick as the guy who was too stunned to speak after the first screening of The Phantom Menace.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
Young Indiana Jones is a massive show. It was wildly expensive to produce, with episodes costing between $1.5 to $2 million, which is close to $4 million today when adjusting for inflation. The high cost was mainly attributed to the show being shot on location: Egypt, London, France, probably not Russia. It also had a pretty decent VFX budget, which doesn't always hold up to HD restoration. Lucas had originally planned for 70 different stories, 7-0, that would chronicle Indiana Jones' life from birth all the way up to the events of Temple of Doom, but only 30-ish or so of those stories ever made it to TV. I'm talking about all this behind the scenes stuff because there's already one big wait a minute we've got to talk about, and that's old Indiana Jones.
You're right, it was.
When the show aired in its original format, each episode contained bookends featuring a 90-something-year-old Indiana Jones who was alive and kicking in 1993 and seemingly living in Staten Island. Old Indiana, played by Canadian actor George Hall, would set up each episode by regaling someone with a story from his past.
This reminds me of the time I was in Italy. Italy? The
reason why Old Indy is such a sore thumb in this timeline is because the show also features characters who are the descendants of Indiana Jones. There's his daughter Sophie, grandchildren Spike, Lucy, and Caroline, and great-grandchildren Annie and Harry. We'd never see or hear any mention of who Sophie's mother is, or if she's even still alive.
Oh my goodness, we're late. If we don't leave right now, we're gonna miss the tea and cookie presentation.
Dial of Destiny basically shoots all of the old Indiana Jones stuff right in the head. It's a little far-fetched to imagine a 70-something-year-old Indiana Jones fathering a brood of children with Marion right after the Apollo 11 mission, so we're gonna go ahead and just put old Indiana in the fridge for this timeline. And I feel comfortable doing that because George Lucas did the same exact thing when the show was recut and reworked for the DVD releases in 2007 and 2008. For those releases, all of the old Indiana bookends were removed and episodes were stitched together to create feature-length adventures out of two separate stories. Which is why the only rips of the segments with Old Indy are such poor quality, and some have subtitles burned in. Like I said at the top of this video, the Indiana canon is kind of all over the map. And speaking of maps, let's get back on track. Indiana Jones was born in Princeton, New Jersey to Professor Henry Walton Jones Sr., a professor of medieval studies at Princeton University, and he kind of looks like BB No Money. I'm not sure exactly where the Jones family would have landed on the whole Taylor ham versus Porkle debate. If you live in Mercer County, please sound off in the comments.
Put her there, pard. Texas?
New Jersey.
Ain't nothing to be ashamed of, son.
Less is known about Indiana's mother, Anna Mary Jones. We know that she looked great in big hats, that she had a sister whose name we never learn, and that Indiana referred to his mom as...
She's the sweetest, smartest, most wonderful woman who ever lived.
Very soon after his entry into the world, Henry Jr. developed an early love for exploring and was introduced to the dog that he would take his namesake from, Indiana. There's not a lot that we see from Indy's childhood until about 1908. Henry Sr. becomes obsessed with the Holy Grail after seeing it in a vision, which sends him on an academic journey where he's mocked and ridiculed by his peers for being such a Grail nerd. During the series, we learn that Indiana had a younger sister for a very short amount of time. Sometime between 1900 and early 1908, Susie Jones was born and sadly passed away from an undisclosed sickness. We don't learn about this until 1910, when young Indiana is stricken with typhoid.
Am I gonna die like Susie?
But enough of that sad stuff. This timeline really leaves the station in 1908, when Henry Sr. writes a book about chivalry and the Holy Grail that is so good he gets invited around the world to talk about it.
Darling, we're going on a journey round the world.
His new book was such a big success that he'd gotten invitations to speak at all kinds of schools and universities.
The Jones family pack up their car, leave the dog at home, and head for Oxford University in April of that year. It's there where Henry Sr. extends an employment offer to his former tutor, Helen Margaret Seymour, aka Stone Cold.
I know how much you've always wanted to travel. It's the chance of a lifetime. Don't say you're going to turn your back on it.
Miss Seymour joins the family Jones as Indiana's tutor and third parental figure, since Henry Sr. is too busy talking to guys with tiny glasses about magic cups to spend time with his family. In May of that year, the four of them arrive at their first official lecture spot in Cairo, Egypt. Miss Seymour and Indiana decide to take in the pyramids of Giza one afternoon, but are soon abandoned by their tour guide, which seems to happen a lot, according to who's going to show up. Thankfully for them, they're found by archaeologist, soldier, and writer T.E. Lawrence, who knows Miss Seymour since he also attended Oxford University.
Hello, Miss Seymour.
Mr. Lawrence, in heaven's name, are you doing here?
I've been up in Syria looking at the Crusader castles.
Tiny little anachronism here. Lawrence did travel 1,000 miles alone while exploring the Crusader castles of Syria, but he did that in 1909. Not a huge deal. Not a big problem. It's this chance encounter where Indiana's dreams of becoming an archaeologist begin to manifest.
Archaeology doesn't steal from the past. It opens it, so that everyone may learn from its treasures.
Ned invites Indy and Miss Seymour to an excavation site near Thebes, where they meet another British archaeologist, Howard Carter, as he and his team open up the tomb of a fictional pharaoh named Ka. 14 years later, Howard Carter would later uncover King Tutankhamun's tomb and all of its many, many treasures, which took 10 years to catalog and conserve.
This one bears the name of the king, Tutankhamun.
Ah, the boy pharaoh, Mr. Carter.
He strangely had a lot of sneakers. The tomb claims more lives, and the whole dig turns into a murder mystery with missing mummies, stolen jackal statues, and Indy having his first meeting with a decomposing corpse. Indy watches Lawrence ride off to find the thief who raided Ka's tomb, but this won't be the end of their adventures together. The episodes with 10-year-old Indy definitely lean more educational than action-y, which I enjoy as an adult who loves history, but it's hard to imagine a kid tuning into this show and not immediately falling asleep. For example, the family's next stop is in Florence, Italy, in May of that year. The Joneses take in a performance of La Boheme, and Indy witnesses his mom have a tiny little affair with Italian composer Giacomo Puccini.
Please don't.
I want to hold you in my arms.
That's literally what the whole episode is about, just Puccini being a desperate horn dog for 45 minutes, while Anna struggles with the idea of abandoning her family, and Indiana's having an existential crisis the whole time. Like I said, some episodes are stronger than others. After Italy, the family hops on a boat and takes a ride through the Alboran Sea in July as they stop off in Tangier. They're introduced to British travel writer Emily Keane. Henry Sr. also introduces the family to English journalist Walter Burton Harris. Harris was the main Moroccan correspondent for the Times in Britain all the way through World War I. Indiana makes friends with a young slave named Omar, and the two of them always get into all kinds of danger until they're rescued by Mr. Harris. That September, the family takes a jaunt up to France, where they take in the Mona Lisa, a freaky little puppet show, and Indiana meets a young Norman Rockwell played by Lucas Haas.
I'm Miss Seymour, and you are Norman
Rockwell.
The show never explains why a 14-year-old Norman Rockwell is just bumming around Paris, talking to fun women and hanging out in nightclubs with Impressionist master Edgar Degas. We also meet a very mischievous and shitty Pablo Picasso, who is working on a scheme to prove he's a better painter than Degas.
That is a very dirty trick, Pablo.
I know.
Incredible delivery, no notes, perfect. George Brock is also hanging out, as well as primitive painter Henri Rousseau with his big silly mustache. Writer and former Mrs. Gertrude Stein Alice B. Tolkis is there, Picasso's muse Fernanda Olivier, and art collector Daniel Henry Kahnweiler. This whole episode should have been called Art Nouvelle Vogue. That's a pretty decent Richard Linklater / art history joke, not to toot my own horn.
I suggest you apologize. Never!
In November of 1908, the Joneses are in Vienna, Austria, as guests of the American ambassador. It's here where Indy develops a recurring habit we'll see through the rest of his life, which is easily falling in love with any girl who makes eye contact with him.
So, what should I call you? Your Highness?
In this first specific example, Indy is swooning in his boots over Princess Sophie of Hohenberg.
Sophie!
While in Austria, Henry Sr. and the family are invited to a dinner with some of the biggest names in the world of psychology, as the first International Psychoanalytical Congress is taking place in Vienna during their visit. That conference actually happened in April of that year and was held in Salzburg, and you know what? Doesn't matter, not important. They share a meal with Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung and the worst dinner guest in all of Europe, Sigmund Freud.
But where exactly does love come into all that?
6.
Thank God Freud never found out about the whole Puccini affair, or all the women that Indy will fall for, or that he became a whip guy when he got older. Freud's head would have exploded. Indy runs to the castle and asks for Sophie's eventual hand in marriage from her father, Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
I have come to ask your permission to ask Princess Sophie for her hand in marriage when I am older.
The Archduke shoots down Indy's premature proposal.
I could never allow her to marry an American.
And Serbian student Gavrilo Princip would shoot down the Archduke 6 years later outside of Adeli. Bang bang. The last of a dozen different dominoes to tumble and set off the Great War, which will be a big part of Indy's future.
Indy, give me your mask. Give me your mask.
I can't. It's fucked up, but we're not there yet. We cross over into the year 1909 as the Joneses are headed to a pretty glitzy Russian wedding where Indy goes full Homer Simpson mode.
So,
Indiana gets grounded for his slapstick comedy, but he sneaks out and eventually forms a Mr. Wilson / Dennis the Menace kind of friendship with Leo Tolstoy. I'm pretty positive Dennis did save Mr. Wilson from Cossack raiders at one point. In September, we're on safari in British-controlled East Africa and meet the bull moose himself, Teddy Roosevelt, whose time as president had just ended in March of that year.
Believe it, I was there.
Roosevelt was actually on safari at this time in history. His trip was funded by Andrew Carnegie, who asked Roosevelt to provide wildlife exhibits for the Smithsonian. During his time there, Roosevelt and his hunting party killed well over 11,000 animals. Good God.
I said no more! You've killed enough! No more! That's enough! No more!
Indiana also meets English big game hunter Frederick Silo, who Indy will meet again, and not just because he's played by Paul Freeman. A fun game you can play while watching the show is just clocking how many Amblin and Lucasfilm regulars pop up in the series. January of 1910 brings the Joneses through India, where Indiana learns about cricket and reincarnation from future spiritual leader Jiddu Krishnamurti.
You can call me Indy. Jiddu Krishnamurti.
And Miss Seymour tears into the Theosophical Society for being a bunch of creeps who do weird like purchasing an Indian child and telling him he is the prophesized world teacher. Also, get Charles Ledbetter away from those kids.
What do you intend to do?
Expose you.
The Theosophical Society was started by Russian mystic Helena Blavatsky and American writer Henry Steele Olcott back in 1875. It's kind of impossible to talk about anything related to theosophy and books like The Secret Doctrine without sounding absolutely insane. But segments of Blavatsky's writings about ancient races like the Lemurians, the Atlanteans, and Aryans, and other myths would be co-opted and bastardized by the Thule Society, who would help Hitler rise to power. It's also why some of the Nazi high command were a bunch of dorks who were obsessed with ancient magic and artifacts.
Hitler's a nut on the subject. He's crazy. He's obsessed with the occult.
Speaking of which, in 1910, the Chalice of Antioch was discovered in what is now modern-day Turkey, near the Syrian border. It was originally believed that the chalice was the Holy Grail, and was displayed as such at the 1933 World's Fair. But we know that the real Holy Grail is actually being watched over by the dustiest knight of all time.
Knew you would come.
2 months later, while on a historical tour of Peking, China, Indiana catches a nasty case of typhoid and almost goes off to meet his sister. Following his recovery, the Joneses head to Greece. By the time they arrive in Athens, Miss Seymour has been fighting an illness for a good couple of weeks. With Anna taking care of Miss Seymour, Indy and Henry Sr. end up spending time together for the first real time during this entire world tour.
No, thank you.
Junior!
The father and son get aboard the wrong carriage and find themselves on their first adventure together, which is a bit of a bumpy ride as they make their way to the Meteora.
You selfish pigs!
While visiting the monastery, Indy gets a lesson in philosophy from Spanish philosopher George Santayana, and the whole trip turns into a real bonding experience between the Henrys as they almost die while they're stranded on the world's oldest elevator.
There's absolutely nothing to get worried about.
This also happens to be the final stop of the Jones family world tour, as they return back to New Jersey. Unfortunately, the relationship between Indy and his father will splinter again in the next couple of years. In the intervening 6 years before Indiana's second trip around the globe, we don't see much from him until 1912. For whatever reason, young Jones and Miss Seymour are aboard the Titanic in Young Indiana Jones and the Titanic Adventure. Adventure isn't the word I would have gone with, but sure.
It has been a privilege playing with you tonight.
This is the only Random House book that I'm including on the timeline because it's just so silly. But what's not silly is that on May 16th, Anna Marie Jones sadly passes away after she succumbs to scarlet fever, an event that will loom large over Indiana and his father's relationship for the rest of their lives.
Don't even let me hear you speak of her again.
Why shouldn't I? You never did one thing to make her happy, and now you're taking it all out on me.
Following Anna's passing, Henry Squared moves out to Moab, Utah that summer. It's there where Henry Sr. continues his obsession with the Holy Grail, and Indiana gets involved in some highly dangerous scout antics. Indy's joined up with the Boy Scouts, and while out on a cave excursion with the rest of his troop, he and his buddy Herman stumble across treasure hunters who have dug up a crucifix which belonged to Spanish conquistador Francisco Vázquez de Coronado.
That cross is an important artifact. It belongs in a museum.
Henry Jr. snatches the cross from the literal gold diggers and finds himself on a circus train where he quickly develops his fear of snakes for obvious reasons. It's also where Indy takes his first crack at using a whip, which leaves him with the same chin scar that Harrison Ford has. With a little bit of magic, Indy escapes the train and runs back to the Jonestead, where we see Dog Indiana again for the first time since 1908. And Henry Jr.'s excitement over saving an artifact is very short-lived.
You still got it?
Well, yes, sir. It's right here.
I'm glad to see that.
Turns out the treasure hunters were hired by an antiques collector simply known as Panama Hat, who will show up again 26 years later.
Small world, Dr. Jones. Too small for two of us.
In February of 1913, while in Mesa Verde, Colorado, Indy goes on a stolen treasure hunt in the book The Lost Gold of Durango. I have not read that story, but I'm going to assume somebody finds that gold. Summer finds Indy on an excavation in Egypt with his father's friend Marcus Brody, who has very recently become the assistant curator of the National Museum. This is chronicled in Young Indiana Jones and the Tomb of Terror, where Indy meets a young Salah Mohammed Faisal el-Kahir for the first time, and he has his first supernatural experience when the ghost of King Tut asks Indy for help in stopping German soldiers from using a ring of power to defeat Britain. They also managed to discover King Tut's tomb 9 years before Howard Carter got there. Indy's would-be future father-in-law gets Jack rubied on June 28th of 1914, which sparks the World War I powder keg to finally pop off. The first engagement of the war, the Battle of Liege, is launched on August 5th as Germany invades Belgium. In September of 1914, Indy accompanies Henry Sr. to Greece as they look for more clues relating to the location of the Holy Grail. Maybe. This is another instance of all the different supplemental materials not really linking up. This event is listed in the Ultimate Guide, but it doesn't show up anywhere in Henry Jones Sr.'s Grail Diary. I looked, it's not here, anywhere at all. The Grail Diary came with the Last Crusade computer game that was released in 1989. The diary has journal notes from Henry Sr., which cover events starting in 1898 and ending in 1937, but with no entries from 1914. Speaking of which, 1914 and 15 come and go, with nothing of note happening in Indy's life aside from him attending junior high. In 1916, Indiana is finishing up high school while working as a soda jerk and dating Louise from Teen Witch. The couple find themselves in a bit of a Scooby-Doo scenario when German spies steal an electric motor from Thomas Edison's auto lab.
What happened? Dr. Thompson, they've kidnapped Thompson. They've stolen the plans. Get security, quick.
But it turns out to be a red herring that's pulled off by one of Edison's own engineers.
I wanted what was mine. I was doing all the work and Edison was getting rich. My name should have been on those patents. Mine!
Honestly, don't blame him. It's in March of 1916 when things really start getting going. During spring break, Indy and Henry Sr. head back to the Southwest, and we learn that Indiana and T.E. Lawrence have been pen pals for a good few years now.
Dear Ned, thanks for your letter. It's great to hear you've been posted in Cairo. Reminds me of when we were in Egypt together exploring the tomb of Ka.
Ned's latest correspondence to Indy has him considering joining the fight in Europe as World War I rages on. H-Bone and Jr. step off of the train in New Mexico and are greeted by his dad's side of the family, Aunt Grace, Uncle Fred, and Cousin Frank, who has a very horny discovery to show Indy.
This is your great discovery? It's a bordello. It's just across the border from Columbus. We can be there and back this weekend.
The two make up a lie about going on a camping trip and hitchhike to the edge of the Mexican border with the hope of losing some innocence.
What time's the border open?
Boys looking for a little action, huh?
We sure are.
Their boner adventure comes to a screeching halt when Pancho Villa and his posse ride into town, put on a Wild West stunt show, and run off with some loot. Indy isn't able to say no to a pretty lady, and his chivalry is rewarded with him being put up against the wall, but then taken under the wing of Pancho.
Creí que éramos hombres, no asesinos.
It's here where Indiana meets his new best friend Remy, the oldest looking 22-year-old of all time.
Remy Baudouin, but I'm Belgian, not French.
Remy is a former Belgian sailor who hated the sea and jumped ship in Mexico, where he fell in love with a woman named Lupe, who was killed for speaking out against the government.
But the Federalists came. They destroyed our cantina. And then they killed my Lupe.
Pancho's attacks on Columbus sparks President Woodrow White Hood Wilson to send General John Pershing into Mexico to bring Pancho to justice.
I'm going to teach Villa what it means to invade the United States. I'm going to whip his ass.
After surviving Pershing's first attack, Pancho responds with a big old exploding train, and Indy crosses paths with that murdering tomb thief Demetrios for the first time in 8 years. Indy assists in Operation Danger Train. Pershing and his men push the Pancho pals deeper into Mexico, and the gang raids William Randolph Hearst's hacienda. It's there where Indy translates what I believe is the 1915 film The Warrens of Virginia to his fellow revolutionaries. The following newsreel about the Great War raging in Europe tugs on Remy's heartstrings, and he decides to return to Belgium to fight for his country. Indy, inspired by his letter from Ned, wants to fight the good fight after what he's experienced on the bloody trail with Pancho.
This isn't my war either.
maybe the one in Europe is.
Before the two leave the Land of the Sun, Indy follows Demetrios to his shed full of bombs and stolen treasures, including the head of the jackal, which he stole from Kaz's tomb. I love this little moment right here when Indy uses a whip for what is probably the second time in his life, and he covers his chin scar. I don't know, just a really good acting choice. Indy grabs the jackal head, leaves Demetrios to get turned into history, and catches up with Remy at sunset. The boys hop a train to Veracruz and stow away on a swanky ship where they're put to work after they're discovered.
Oh yeah, well whose idea was it to stow away in the first place?
How was I to know they'd search your lifeboats the first night out?
The boys end up in Dublin for a few days in April, where Indy goes on some pricey dates, meets socialist playwright Sean O'Casey, and they survive the Easter Rebellion. The rebellion was launched by the Irish Republican Brotherhood with the hopes of establishing an independent Ireland and to not be dragged into World War I thanks to Britain, similar to what happened with Australia and New Zealand at the Battle of Gallipoli. The two board a ferry to London, and Indy lies about his age and New Jersey heritage so he can enlist in the Belgian army.
You're the worst liar I've ever met. Welcome to the Belgian army.
Remy meets a nice lady during dinner one night, and Indiana is smitten by suffragette Vicky Prentice, who's played by Elizabeth Hurley back when she had my eyebrows. The lovebirds with dreams of adventure fall for each other pretty quickly, and Indy pays a visit to Miss Seymour, who has been back at Oxford following their world tour. And she calls Henry Jr. out on being way too nonchalant about signing up to fight in the Great War.
What are you doing here?
I came to join up.
I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life.
They also attend a dinner with Winston Jabberjowls Churchill, who is fresh off his utter failure in Gallipoli, and Vicky isn't a big fan of his either.
Anyone of whatever sex who has no voice of the government of the country is not a citizen but a slave.
Before he ships out to the front lines, Indy continues his tradition of proposing at the absolute worst time possible.
I'll probably never love anybody else as much again, but I can't marry you.
At the train station, Indiana says goodbye to Miss Seymour for the last time, and while Indy's ambush proposal to Vicky didn't really work out, Remy's gone and found himself a wife and a family in like record time.
I have a surprise for you. Suzette and I were married this morning.
The train pulls out of the station and is headed for nothing but good times and sunshine. Right, no, it's World War I. It's 3 months until we see Indy and Remy again. A very brutal 3 months. The 9th Belgian Infantry has been through the ringer, suffering tremendous casualties in Flanders, France. With all of their commanding officers now being ghosts, Indy is left in charge.
Well, who's in charge here?
I am, sir.
Things aren't going to get any easier either. The 264 surviving Belgians have been deployed to the Somme, where both British and French forces have been deadlocked with German forces for at least a month at this point in the war. The Battle of the Somme overall lasted from July to November of 1916 and resulted in over 1 million deaths on the battlefield. British forces lost 60,000 men on the first day of combat. Thankfully, author J.R.R. Tolkien was not one of them. Tolkien was a second lieutenant who was at the Battle of the Somme, and I was kind of hoping he'd pop up in the series, but he's a no-show. We do get a really bitchy Daniel Craig, though.
Don't be absurd.
To nobody's surprise, everyone has a terrible time in no man's land. It's kind of crazy that Young Indiana Jones was the lead-in for Monday Night Football. Just imagine you're sitting down on the couch to watch the Eagles play the Packers, and this is what you're getting when you turn on your TV. Indy and his fellow soldier Emile end up separated from their unit behind enemy lines and are taken as prisoners of war. Emile snags them some French officer uniforms before they're sent to a German POW camp, where they promptly assist in a prison break, which results in Emile getting killed. And the bad luck just keeps a-rolling, as the French officer that Indy is impersonating apparently had a real love for breaking out of prison camps.
Your records show 4 escape attempts at other prisons and now 5. That makes you an incorrigible, Lieutenant Blanc.
Wait, there's been a mistake. I'm not him.
Indy is sent to the inescapable fortress prison of Disserstadt, which is a fictional version of real Bavarian fortress city, Ingolstadt. It's there where Indy meets future French President Charles de Gaulle, who reads Indiana for filth like almost immediately.
Who won the World Series in 1912?
Boston Red Sox.
He's not German, he's American. Is your rank also fake, Lieutenant?
Desperate for freedom, Charles and Indy play dead in some caskets as a way to escape the terrible castle. Unfortunately, Charles is captured, but Indiana burns bike rubber and successfully escapes German capture as he cycles his way to France. Indy doesn't spend time away from battle for long, though. He quickly becomes a courier for the French army, speeding commands to the trenches of Verdun, where everything is still just a terrible fucking time. Really bad. Among the injured, Indy is reunited with good old Remy, who is having just a horrible summer.
I don't want to go back to the trenches. Just send me back if I feel well.
Jones also unknowingly volunteers to spy on the German command, where he learns that they'll be bringing in a double dose of Big Berthas before Jones turns the place into Coney Island on 4th of July. The Big Bertha howitzer was an insane piece of artillery. It had a firing range of 6 miles, it required 100 men to load a single shell in it, thanks to its shells weighing nearly a ton. It was such a scary piece of weaponry that it was actually developed in secret by the German industrial family the Krupps, who are very different from their American counterpart, the Klumps. With no rest for Remy, he's headed back to the front line, where the French forces are about to be flattened into pate when the Berthas roll into town. Unable to condemn Remy and hundreds of men to their death, Indy disposes of attack orders that were given to him directly from French Commander-in-Chief Joseph Joffre.
I'm giving you a direct order.
And I am staring at an order canceling the attack.
Jones finds himself back in the mud with Remy and the Belgian army, but he manages to wrangle an October furlough to Paris thanks to a friend of Henry Sr.'s named Sheev Palpatine. Sorry, Professor Levi. The majority of Indy's time in Paris is spent sleeping around with exotic dancer and German spy Mata Hari.
I was taken in and questioned. By whom? The police. They think you're a spy for the Germans. That's ridiculous.
This 17-year-old Jones ends up becoming a little too clingy over the whole situationship.
Who are you with?
That is none of your business. We've known each other 48 hours.
It's kind of like that movie Young Adam with Tilda Swinton and Ewan McGregor where he hangs dong. Just me? Okay. After one more night with Mata Hari, Indy is sent back to the front lines with Remy, specifically the front lines of East Africa.
Whoa, Africa. I've always wanted to come here.
A year later, Mata Hari would be executed by firing squad for her spy crimes. Eyewitnesses of her execution said that Mata Hari refused a blindfold and blew a kiss to the firing squad before they pulled the trigger, which is pretty cool. Indy and Remy hop on one wrong train after another and find themselves lost in the savannah until Indy happens upon Captain Frederick Silu for the second time in his life.
Henry Jones, Jr.
Son of Professor Jones?
Yes!
You were lost then too, I recall.
Well, this really wasn't my fault.
Out of the frying pan and into the fire, Silos recruits Indy to be part of his Howling Commandos in their effort to find and destroy the Phantom Train.
And you wish to bedevil your enemy by land? How would you do it?
I'd mount that sucker on a flat car and ride the rails like a hobo out of hell.
I should clarify that it's not actually full of phantoms. I'm a pretty big fan of this episode where Indy is just hanging out with a bunch of old heads, learning about life and stealing toilet paper.
Germans should take their toilet paper seriously.
So do we.
The Geezer Brigade successfully explodes the hell out of the Phantom Train, and then they trick Indy and Remy into helping them on their next mission, which is capturing German commander Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck.
You mistake me for someone else.
No mistaking Frederick Selou. Hunter, soldier, worthy opponent.
Around this time in World War I, von Lettow had suffered severe losses thanks to Britain and Belgium, and had begun moving his soldiers south as they conceded more and more ground to the British. According to all of my research, he was never taken hostage via hot air balloon.
I want Von Lettow!
You can have him back! Remy, throw Von Lettow over!
No!
Fine, then help us to get down!
1916 comes to an end, and Indiana almost does as well. Indy's lucky locket stops the bullet, and he responds by going full psycho mode and just decimates an entire foxhole of dudes. Totally not terrifying at all. The now Captain Jones and his men are assigned to a retrieval mission to collect a consignment of weapons that are over 2,000 miles away. Indy lays all of this out in a letter to his tow-headed pen pal, T.E. Lawrence, on December 3rd.
My dear Ned, I have embarked on a great adventure.
The super long and hazardous trek across the Belgian Congo is so much worse than you can even imagine. A real bummer-palooza. What remains of their unit makes it to a hospital where Indy is told by the French that no more men can be spent on their foolhardy mission of blowing up weapons so the Germans can't get them.
Half this garrison is down with malaria. The hospital cannot accommodate them all. I can have your weapons loaded onto your boat, but I can't assign you any men for the journey.
A mission that Indy is determined to see to the end, even though his CO was a huge prick to him with his last words.
I won't let you down, sir.
Of course you will.
Indiana, now in charge, continues the trip upriver and into 1917, where his soldiers really hate his guts, like they did in 1916. The boat full of cursed and sweaty souls are thankfully rescued by German physician, writer, and colonization enthusiast Albert Schweitzer.
You're German.
You're perceptive.
Not a good guy. The French military eventually arrests Schweitzer and ships him back to Germany. The hits keep coming for Indiana as he sinks deeper and deeper into the unyielding horrors of World War I. Indiana is sent back to France from the African front lines, where he writes to Lawrence on February 2nd, 1917, about how he and Remy have joined Belgian intelligence and are thankfully no longer in the trenches.
After my experience there, I've decided that whatever I can do to stop this war is all that matters now.
At least that's what happens for Remy. He gets set up with a super cake position as a cafe manager, where he'll operate as the main point of contact for the Belgian underground, also known as La Dame Blanche.
You will be our main contact with the White Lady.
Unsure where to put Jones, he's sent back out into the field at Ravenel. This isn't the last time we'll see Remy though. The two friends who have been through hell and back together will do it again one last time before they part ways for good. When Indy arrives for his new job, French-American pilot Raoul Lufberry informs him that he's going to be the onboard surveillance photographer for a crew of freewheeling American pilots.
We fly, you snack. Sir, there must be some kind of mistake.
A crew that includes Hobart Hobie Baker, who in addition to being one of the first great American hockey players, was also a student of Henry Sr. One of those is a true thing.
Professor Jones's son?
That's right.
I don't believe this, guys. This captain we've been sent is the same little punk that used to run errands for me back in college.
Indy's fear of flying isn't helped at all when they're shot out of the sky by Baron Manfred von Richthofen and his funny voice.
I have never bagged an American before.
I love your pizzas, sir. Thank you. Indiana is once again taken prisoner. I believe that's number 5 on his punch card, and he makes a daring escape back to safety on Hobie's wings. Indy survives his 2-week stint as the eye in the sky, even after getting on the Red Baron list because he photographed Richthofen getting shot out of the air.
There. You did it, Indy. The Red Baron going down.
Indy is brought back to the French intelligence office in Paris on the same day that America formally joins World War I.
Wilson declared war on Germany this morning. America's in the war.
Which is a bit of an anachronism here since we're still in February and the United States Congress didn't authorize the declaration of war against Germany until April 6, 1917. Jones is thrust into field duty as a spy where he gets suited with all the bells and blade boots that come with doing espionage in German territory. I'm going to kind of speed run through Indy's career as a covert operative for French intelligence. This run of episodes gets surprisingly deep into very specific inner workings of underground movements and political actions towards the end of World War I, and I feel like talking about it at length will probably sound like homework to a lot of people. His first assignment is to try and buy the loyalty of Dutch aviation engineer Anthony Fokker.
Your mission is to contact Fokker and persuade him to defect to us.
Which doesn't go the way he was hoping, but Indiana does manage to blow up a big German Air Force base. Indiana is then sent to Austria in March to work as a spy chaperone to Swiss fancy boys Sixtus and Xavier of Bourbon-Parma, as they try to convince their brother-in-law, Emperor Karl I of Austria, to sign a peace treaty with England and France.
Austria must agree to support the French claim to the region of Alsace-Lorraine.
Go on.
You see what I mean about homework? The bad guy from Lethal Weapon 2 is lurking around in that episode, so that's fun. Indiana heads to Barcelona in May of that year, where he quickly gets swept into an Allied resistance group of goofy spies consisting of British comedians as they work to foil a German plot at the opera. And while there, Indiana catches up with his very good personal friend, Pablo Picasso.
Don't tell me you're...
Yep.
Norman! It's good to see you again!
Possibly that same month, Indiana is then sent to Prague under the alias Amadeus Schubelgruber. If you couldn't tell by that name, this is a very serious episode.
Dat is dan 3 stuivers. Maar ik zou dat damesondergoed dat je verkoopt ook nemen.
His mission in Prague is to sit in an apartment where the fate of the civilized world depends on him answering an important phone call.
Wait 3 days in an apartment for a phone call?
Do as you're told.
The only problem is, there's no phone in the room, and the whole thing turns into a Jacques Tati type of Looney Tunes situation. He's also helped out by Franz Kafka.
I investigate industrial accidents.
What is going on?
Shall I come round with you and see if we can track this thing down together?
July brings the birthday boy to St. Petersburg, Russia, where he's making friends with the young Leninists who get gunned down by Cossacks during the July Days demonstration through the streets. Again, this was the lead-in for Monday Night Football.
Doggies, it's football time!
September of 1918 finds Indiana in Istanbul, where he's masquerading as a Swedish journalist while trying to persuade Turkish General Mustafa Kemal Ataturk into signing a separate peace deal with France. He's also fallen in love. Again, this time with a schoolteacher named Molly who he proposes to. The wedding sadly never happens, as Molly is accidentally shot dead by a German spy.
Oh my god, Molly? Molly?
In October, Indy is seconded by T.E. Lawrence to assist British and Australian forces that are trying to take the city of Jerusalem via Beersheba. Indy and Catherine Zeta-Jones are sent to protect the wells from the Turks, which are critical to British victory. The production value of this whole episode is buck wild, especially when Daniel Craig gets bodied by a horse. I know it's a stuntman, but still, definitely one of the top 3 adventures in my opinion. Really great. 1918 starts with a gondola ride through Venice for young Jones, as he's recruited by Spymaster Colonel Waters to assist him in capturing a rogue general, and also find out who's been cutting off bits of French and American agents in the mountains of Transylvania.
Included was a warning not to send any more agents.
You'll never guess who it is. After dispatching of a mentally ill man who might have been Dracula, Indiana heads south to northern Italy, where he's running missions as a disguised and devastated officer, convincing German soldiers to desert. I'll have a Gugelhof, please. Indiana spends most of his time off the battlefield, competing for the love of the beautiful Giulietta against Sloppy Joe himself, Ernest Hemingway.
Dirty two-timing rat! Judas!
November brings one last adventure for Indy as World War I begins its slow and hellish conclusion. Remy's sweet gig as a resistance coffee shop owner fell apart apparently, and the boys are back in the trenches hunting spies during the literal last hour of the war.
Armistice goes into effect at 1100 hours. The war will be over in an hour.
We know that, sir.
The dedicated duo track the potential snitch through no man's land before he's killed by a German soldier who tries to pick his pockets. Remy searches him for treasonous plans but only finds a map written in ancient Greek in his boot. And Indy, like many times before, is burdened with the last words of another dying man.
You must stop him! Stop him! The eye of the peacock!
The horrors finally stop persisting a moment later as fighting in World War I finally comes to an end.
Indy! The war is over! Indy!
Indy and Remy arrive back in England, and Indiana heads directly to see Miss Seymour, who unfortunately has passed away from influenza on November 4th, days before the war officially came to an end.
I'm sorry, sir, you're too late. Miss Seymour passed away last week.
She did, however, leave a letter for her favorite student, imploring young Henry to mend things with his father and to follow his dreams.
Make something of yourself. I know you will.
While staying with Remy and his family, they discover that the map they found in the soldier's boot is a treasure map to the Eye of the Peacock, a giant diamond that used to belong to Alexander the Great. Some spilled Merlot reveals a secret written in English, and Remy convinces his best friend to go on one last adventure with him.
Indy, you're my best friend. Let's do it together. One last adventure.
An adventure that takes them to the city of Alexandria, Egypt, where they meet a guy who's just not even trying to hide how evil he is.
Alexander was a magnificent man. I wish I would have been alive then to know him.
Yeah.
Indiana also has a reunion with archaeologist Howard Carter, and the boys get some help solving the mysteries of Alexander the Great from author E.M. Forster, whose works include Howard's End and his posthumously published novel, Maurice. Indy and Remy jump on a ship that's heading to India, who leads them to the tomb of Lycomedes. It's here they find a box that should contain the peacock's eye. A box that Zyke tries to take from them, but Remy is fully gripped by diamond madness at this point, and he ain't giving up that box.
You two do not kill easily.
No, we do not!
Zyke unfortunately makes off with the box, but he's plugged by his partner Lily, a chaotic treasure hunter looking for riches who forms a flimsy truce with Indy and Remy when the cruise liner they're on that's heading to Singapore is hijacked by Jin Ming and her crew of pirates. The hunt for the peacock's eye, in simple terms, is a fucking shit show. It's just a disaster. Lily gets killed by pirates over the box, Remy grows increasingly obsessed with finding the diamond, and after nearly being killed by the ocean and native tribes, they wash ashore on the Trobriand Islands off the coast of eastern New Guinea. The two are welcomed by Polish anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, who has been living with the native tribe and documenting their way of life.
I want to document this culture so that it won't be lost when it changes and everything changes, no?
The mystery of the iron box turns out to be a big wet fart of a surprise. There's no priceless diamond in the box, just a stoned etch with a message in an ancient language that leads to another dead end.
We almost died of thirst! We traveled to hell! Throw us down!
Remy, relax!
With a kind farewell from Malinowski, Indy boards a ship headed to England before he begins his return to the Promised Land, New Jersey. This is also where we say goodbye to Remy on the timeline. Based on the ending of that adventure, it seems that our mustachioed madman continued his search for the Eye of the Peacock, also known as the Peacock's Eye.
I don't know when it'll stop for you.
It does not stop! Not until we find what we are looking for!
I think you have to do what you have to do.
There's no word on whether or not Remy was successful or returned to his family in England, but somebody did end up finding the 140-carat diamond, and it landed in the hands of Lao She sometime before 1935. In the final days of World War I, Indiana is in Paris working as a translator on behalf of the American delegation at the Paris Peace Conference during the spring of 1919. The Paris Peace Conference was a 6-month-long set of diplomatic meetings following the end of World War I. This is when the allied nations of the United States, France, England, Russia, Japan, and the Kingdom of Italy constructed the peace terms for the defeated Central Powers. At said peace conference, Great Britain and France began redrawing ownership maps of Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific Islands, along with slamming Germany and the Central Power nations with hefty fines for the war they started. The Paris Peace Conference is a very volatile and important moment of history. If you've never read about it, it's such a major linchpin of history. Highly recommend. There were representatives from 32 different nations that came to Paris to work on what the world was going to look like after the Great War had ended, with people like T.E. Lawrence representing Prince Faisal and the Arab nations in their yearning for independence.
We have kept our word. All we ask now is that you prove the greatness of your nations and keep yours.
Spoiler, that did not happen. Indiana also meets a young Ho Chi Minh at the conference who is imploring for the independence of Vietnam as well.
I'm sorry.
No. At least they heard us.
I don't think they listen to anyone anymore.
The ultimate outcome from the conference was the formation of the League of Nations and the Treaty of Versailles. So many of the choices that were made by so many different countries at this conference creates one of the biggest gasoline trails that will lead to World War II.
Isn't victory beastly?
With the war over, Indiana finally heads back stateside after 3 years away from home. He jumps on a boat where he, of course, falls in love with the beautiful Amy Wharton, which is doomed to fail.
And I really do hope that you get everything that you want.
Indy also runs into his old flame Luis, and apparently Jones was childhood friends with eventual actor, singer, football star, and activist Paul Robeson, who is graduating from Rutgers that week and will deliver his famous valedictorian speech titled The New Idealism.
And so I speak to you today of a new idealism, and I invoke its spirit in the days of change.
What's not ideal is the metric ton of tension hovering in the air whenever the Henrys are in a room together. Oof.
Sorry I'm late.
When I said dinner was at 7:30, I did not mean 7:52.
Indy, in an effort to be away from his father, takes a job as a lab assistant to rocket engineer Robert Goddard, who invented the first liquid-fueled rocket. The big explosion, though, happens in the Jones dining room when the bomb named Mom finally drops.
You can't. You never could. Not even when Mother was alive.
How dare you?
Not even.
How dare you mention your mother to me?
The two do have a tiny bit of closure later on, which is then dynamited to hell when Henry Sr. is devastated to learn that his son has chosen the University of Chicago over Princeton.
Father.
Very well. That's what you want.
Dad.
Close the door behind you when you leave, Junior.
This moment right here is the last time the two would see each other for nearly 20 years.
We've hardly spoken for 20 years.
The 1920s come roaring in and Indy finally goes away to college. It's in Chicago where he begins studying under Abner Ravenwood and meets his future colleague Harold Oxley. There's a jumbled bit of revolving college friends and roommates that are going to be mentioned right here. This is Oxley's first appearance on the timeline, and we never hear about him again until the Crystal Skull comes to town.
I haven't talked to Harold Oxley in 20 years.
In 1921, we'll meet his saxophone-playing roommate Jack Shannon, who only exists in the pages of the Bantam novels. Also, imagine being neighbors to their dorm, two saxophone players just going all the time. Unbearable. There's literally no renderings of Jack Shannon's face. These are the only two images of the character, but he's described as a redhead that's well over 6 feet tall. An Irish redheaded musician that's over 6 feet tall is basically Conan O'Brien.
Do you scare easily, would you think?
No.
Another wrench in the gears of all this is the game Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings, which introduces another collegiate friend, German exchange student Magnus Wahler, along with Professor Charles Jacob Kingston, who will come back around later. Back in the TV universe, Indy's saddled with Admiral Buzzkill Elliot Ness as his roommate, because of course he is.
You're the world's youngest stuffy old fart. I am not.
We don't see a lot of Indy's time spent in the classroom in Chicago. His time is occupied by working at a mafia-owned restaurant, and he's taken in by jazz legend Sidney Bechet, who teaches him about jazz and blues music and also gives him a soprano sax.
Way to get confident is to learn one thing at a time.
Indiana, Sidney, Elliot, and Ernest Hemingway, who's on his journalist beat.
Ernie? Indy! The hell, huh?
All get caught up in a hornet's nest with every organized crime family in Chicago when they stick their noses into the murder of crime boss Big Jim Colosimo, who was murdered by a secret Al Capone, and Billy Batts.
Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
Little bit of crime history here. Al Capone, technically, by all records, was not in Chicago at the time of Big Jim's murder. But the show gets around that by introducing secret Al Capone, Al Brown.
His real name is Capone. Capone? Skipped out of New York town, the murder charge on his head. Came here and he must have taken up the alias Al Brown.
The conclusion to this story is pretty funny. It posits that Elliot Ness decides to become a detective after he sees how corrupt the Chicago justice system is.
What are you doing?
In June of 1920, Indy heads east to the Big Apple, where he hopes to pick up a summer job at a nightclub that Sidney is opening.
You know that waiter's job I promised you, Jonesy? I don't think it's gonna happen.
While on the train, Indiana continues his streak of falling in love with a woman over the course of a few hours. In pretty rapid succession, Indy meets composer George Gershwin, groovy socialist ingenue Kate Rivers, Irving Berlin, and ends up with a job helping produce and stage direct George White's Broadway review of Scandals. There's like 4 theater nerds right now who are losing their minds. It's a very, very low stakes kind of adventure. The biggest drama in all of it is Indiana trying to balance dating 3 girls at the same time, which ends exactly how you'd expect.
I know.
You're despicable. You're out. You're fired.
Once again jobless and hurting for money, Indy receives an olive branch from George White, who gets Jones a meeting with the granddaddy of Universal Pictures, Carl Laemmle.
Wonderful. You're just the guy I need.
What for?
Indiana jets off to Hollywoodland on Laemmle's behalf, where he meets future Universal president Irving Thalberg and gets a close-up look at the beauty of how movies are made.
Like that. Now, get even.
Indy's main mission in Hollywood is to sabotage the production of the film Foolish Wives, which is being directed by the super intense and eccentric filmmaker Erich von Stroheim.
I am an artist. Here, in my studio, I create.
I should clarify that Jones is there to sabotage the film because it was the most expensive movie production in film history at that time and was constantly going over budget and over schedule, to the point that Universal did advertise it as the most expensive film ever made. Jones gets lassoed as an assistant to director John Ford and actor Harry Carey, who are in the middle of writing their new Western, the fictional film 6 Steps to Hell.
To 6 steps to hell.
6 steps to hell.
After an actor falls prey to a snakebite, Indiana gets put as number 3 on the call sheet and experiences the rush of being directed by one of the greats.
I've never seen such a basic lack of coordination in one human being. That's lunch.
Despite all odds and that dead actor, 6 Steps to Hell is completed, and Indiana leaves Burbank with a goodbye kiss and a broken leg from all of his horsing around on set. This is our last televised adventure with Indiana, as he heads back to Chicago to get his degree and get into a whole bunch of literary excursions. We're now at a bit of a transition period for Indy. Our time with Sean Patrick Flannery has come to an end, but there are a handful of literary adventures that take place before he gets to Shanghai in 1935. I mentioned earlier that there are 12 original Indiana Jones novels published from 1991 to 1999 by Bantam Books, 6 of which were written by author Rob McGregor. We're not going to spend a lot of time in this section, mainly because these are books and there's not a lot of supplemental material I can include to get all the beats of the stories across. I didn't want this to become long stretches of me reading stories at you. I can barely talk good enough as it is. For the book enthusiasts out there, if you ever encounter one of these in the wild, snatch it up, because they are not easy to come by anymore. With all that said, if you do plan on reading any of these books here on screen and want to avoid any spoilers, you can jump to this time code. Our first stop in this section of the timeline is in 1922 in the book Indiana Jones and the Peril at Delphi. At this point in time, Indy is a graduate student in Paris at the Sorbonne. Just saying it now too, Indiana's college career seems to only last 2 years before he's out in the field digging up stuff. Kind of a mess, but doesn't really matter. This book was published a whole 2 years before Indiana went to Chicago and broke his dad's heart. So there's the answer to how Indiana managed to graduate in just 2 years. Lack of communication between Lucasfilm departments. There's some conflicting pieces of media around this point too. According to the Ultimate Guide, it's at the Sorbonne where Indiana met his dark reflection, Renee Belloc.
I am a shadowy reflection of you.
This is thrown off a bit by the novels. specifically this one. In the Peril at Delphi, Indiana is studying linguistics and Greek archaeology. His professor, Dorian Bellacamos, announces she will be leaving the university for the semester in order to return to Delphi to oversee the recovery of an archaeological treasure. That treasure is the Omphalos of Delphi, which is a beehive-shaped structure from the Hellenistic period, which is also referred to as the navel of the earth. If you go by what the ancient poem the Theogony posits, then it is the same stone that Rhea used to trick the Titan Kronos when he thought that he had devoured the god Zeus. Dorian surprises Indiana when she invites him to join her as her assistant. That, of course, is part of a big ruse which revolves around a 16th century old cult known as the Order of Pythia, who were loyal to the Oracle of Delphi. She means to use the power of the Omphalos to become the new Oracle of Delphi in a plot to kill Constantine I of Greece. A plot she didn't need an ancient artifact to accomplish, since King Constantine was exiled in 1922 after being defeated during the Greco-Turkish War, and he died in Palermo 4 months later. Unrelated to anything on this timeline, Constantine got to sit on the throne because the previous king of Greece died from sepsis after being bit by a monkey that was part of his own royal zoo. That's true. This book ends with Indiana in the possession of the Omphalos, and he brings it to a curator he knows at the National Museum in Chicago, a curator who will later be confirmed as Marcus Brody.
I'm sure everything you do for the museum conforms to the International Treaty for the Protection of Antiquities.
Just 2 years later, Indy is still at the Sorbonne and exploring caves in Montagnard, France, where he comes across Ice Age era cave paintings, which feels like a reference to the La Salle caves, which were discovered in 1940 in the same French commune. I'm sorry to any French people who are watching this, I am butchering your language. Indy is with fellow grad student Mara Rogers, and they're being led by lab instructor Roland Walcott, who attempts to kill Indy and Mara and take credit for their discovery. That doesn't go over well, and Walcott ends up diving into a river below the caves and is presumed dead. It's a weird field trip. 1925 is where we hit a little bit of a hiccup in the timeline. Indy has secured his first teaching job as a professor in London University's archaeology department, in Indiana Jones and the Dance of the Giants. While teaching at university, Indy meets 20-year-old Deidre Campbell, a student in his class whose thesis paper claims to have uncovered the location of a golden scroll that proves the existence of Merlin. The whole Merlin's magic scrolls thing was also a plot point in Gargoyles, but these two universes never cross paths, unfortunately. Intrigued by both Deidre and her thesis, the two of them head off to Stonehenge to find the scroll. Unfortunately, Deidre's secret half-brother, Adrian Powell, is also after the scroll and its powers to resurrect an ancient druidic cult known as the Order of Hyperboreans. It's always cults with these people. I know it's the 1920s and there's not a ton of stuff to do, but get a different hobby. It never goes well for anyone. All of this book clashes with what is laid out in Indiana Jones and the Ultimate Guide from 2008. According to the guide, 1925 was the same year that Indiana Jones finally met Marion Ravenwood while he was studying under Professor Abner Ravenwood and assisting with his search for the Ark of the Covenant.
Abner did the first serious work on Tanis, collected some of its relics. It was his obsession, really.
The Bantam books were not allowed to use any characters from the franchise aside from Indiana Jones, obviously, and eventually Marcus Brody, who is making his first appearance in the timeline here. Rob McGregor worked around this hurdle by introducing original characters like the previously mentioned Jack Shannon and love interests like Deidre Campbell, since characters like Marion, Short Round, and Sala were not on the table. The guide does say that Marion and Indy's secret fling lasted less than a year, mainly due to Indy going off with her dad to search for artifacts, and the friendship between Abner and Indy turned sour when Abner learned that he was dating his daughter.
I hadn't really spoken to him for 10 years. We were friends, but had a bit of a falling out, I'm afraid.
Indy was able to travel to Mexico, Ireland, and most of Europe during 1916, so if we're being generous, there was probably enough time for him to abandon Abner and the search for the Ark and go take a job in London. Indy and Deidre managed to sabotage Adrian's magical attempts at becoming prime minister, and soon after that, the couple decides to tie the knot. If there's one thing Indiana is going to do, it is going to propose to a woman, and then she will probably die soon after. The two officially exchanged vows on the RMS Mauretania in March of 1926 as they travel through Rio de Janeiro. But their honeymoon phase doesn't last long, sadly. Spoiler. In the book Indiana Jones and the Seven Veils, Indy and Deidre are headed deep into the Brazilian jungle to try and locate Lieutenant Colonel Percy Fawcett, who has gone missing during his expedition to find the lost city of Z. A pretty frivolous rescue mission on their part, since Percy Fawcett and his son Jack most likely died or were killed before or after their final correspondence letter was received on May 29th in 1925. Speaking of dead in the jungle, a few weeks after their wedding, Indiana and Deidre are flying to South America, and their plane goes down in the jungle, with Indy being the only survivor of the plane crash. A year after the loss of Deidre, Indy and his depression have settled back into teaching Celtic archaeology at the University of London. His retirement is super short-lived when he's approached by Russian doctor Vladimir Zolobatsky, who believes he has found the location of Noah's Ark in Indiana Jones and the Genesis Deluge. This book is bonkers. Al Capone pops up, Indy quickly falls for Dr. Zabłocki's daughter Katrina, they find a booby-trapped Noah's Ark stuck in a glacier, and they're hunted by an ancient order of Janissaries who have been protecting the Ark for God knows how long, and Indiana has a cosmic conversation with Noah after he buries the boat in a big old avalanche. This book, and what we discover in the Great Circle in 1936, will bump heads when it comes to continuity. In 1928, Indy is in Colorado exploring his way through ancestral cliff cities, which are really awesome if you've never seen them in person. Highly recommend. Indy's Southwest vacation is interrupted by Mara Rogers, who was with Indiana in those French caves in 1924 when Roland Walcott tried to kill them. In Indiana Jones and the Unicorn's Legacy, Roland is on Mara's trail as she believes to have located an ancient staff made out of a unicorn's horn, which is also wanted by an Italian anti-fascist mob boss named Diego Calderone, who is killed by eventual human piñata Benito Mussolini. Indy ends up burying the staff referred to as the Alicorn deep in a cavern in Utah. In the spring of 1929, Indy is on a dig with Marcus Brody on Easter Island in the last Rob McGregor novel, Indiana Jones and the Interior World. Indy helps Marcus try to find his missing friend Hans, but everything goes absolutely bonkers, and Indiana finds himself in the Interior World, which is different from the Hollow Earth, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's there where Dr. Jones has a standoff with the evil sorcerer Maloa, I think, who plans to use the Alicorn to branch the portals between the Interior World and Earth, and then form a horrible alliance with Adolf Hitler. It's kind of like the plot of Mortal Kombat, but with way more Nazis. In November of 1929, Indiana is part of the Jastrow expedition in Iceland. The excavation project, sponsored by Barnett College, brings together Indy and his fully platonic friend, treasure hunter Sophia Hapgood, who will pop up a couple more times. This is all in the Indiana Jones CD-ROM game, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which we'll circle back to in 10 years. Like, not in real life, in this video. In 1930, a year after destroying the Alicorn and keeping everyone safe from weirdos living inside the Earth, Indiana is on his worst adventure in the Martin Caidin novel, Indiana Jones and the Sky Pirates. A really boring book despite how fun the title is. Indy is working for the American government, for some reason, to help solve the mystery of who's behind a bunch of flying saucers that are supposedly being piloted telepathically. It's a bit of a slog unless you love aircraft talk, which is all over this book. This is also the first Indiana Jones novel to include a reference to Indy's time in the Belgian army. We also get to meet archaeologist and flying ace Gail Parker, who carries over into the next novel, Indiana Jones and the White Witch. Gail, whose real name is Myrna Abi Khalil, attempts to teach Indy how to fly a plane, which clearly didn't go well, as we'll see in Temple of Doom in 5 years.
You know how to fly, don't you?
No. Do you?
The duo get caught up in yet another treasure hunt, which involves a village of witches, gold coins that trace back to Jesus Christ, and Merlin shows up again. Can't keep that guy out of an Indiana Jones story. Not happening. 1931 gives us one small event that we can place on the timeline in the Dark Horse comic Indiana Jones and the Shrine of the Sea Devil. In that comic, we learn that Indy stopped a group of criminals from robbing a museum in Afghanistan, one of which he'll bump into again in 4 years. There's a gap year in 1932 where Indy is absent from any adventures that we're aware of, but he's definitely busy.
I seem to remember that in Honduras you were accused of being a grave robber rather than an archaeologist.
The novel Indiana Jones and the Philosopher's Stone drops us into November 1933. It's this book that posits that Indiana had his first encounter with both the famed Crystal Skull and the previously mentioned Renee Belloc, even though the Ultimate Guide places their first meeting back in 1922. Neither of these events really trip over the other one, so you can pick and choose your favorite origin for this greedy little heir of a wine vineyard.
It's my family label.
Following that, the novel Indiana Jones and the Dinosaur Eggs drops us into the timeline on Halloween in 1933. This book is a pretty great time. We get introduced to reporter slash fake nun Joan Starbuck, who approaches Professor Jones at Princeton in an attempt to help her find her father, who went missing in Mongolia and may have discovered living dinosaurs. It's also the book that introduces us to crime boss Lao She and Indy's friend Wuhan, who will pop up again right before the showdown at Club Obi-Wan in 2 years.
Good service here.
That's not a waiter.
Wuhan's an old friend.
1934 is a little bit of a busy year. In March, Indy's in New Orleans during Mardi Gras looking for clues as to where the Crystal Skull might be. He also gets shot in the arm by Belloc during a duel in a cemetery. Pretty cool. All of that is in the novel Indiana Jones and the Hollow Earth, which is different from the Interior World. For clarity, the Interior World is more wizards and portals, while the Hollow Earth is more ancient civilization and woolly mammoths. The final stop in 1934 is in the novel Indiana Jones and the Secret of the Sphinx, which is a really solid adventure. Indy teams up with a duo of magicians who are also siblings and is trying to stop the Japanese from discovering the Omega Book, which holds the knowledge of everything that will ever happen. It also sets up a few things we'll see on screen, like Marcus telling Indy about the ashes of Nurhaci, the Staff of Aaron pops up in the story, which is different from the Staff of Kings that Indy will get his hands on in 5 years. 1935 has a lot going on. The year starts off with Indiana Jones recently being saved by a Polynesian tribe, and he steps onto the deck of the good ship Julianne on January 11th in the Dark Horse comic Indiana Jones and the Shrine of the Sea Devil. It's at this point where Indy is reintroduced to the criminal named Terps, and while scuba diving into the titular Shrine of the Sea Devil, Jones awakens a giant octopus, which destroys the Julianne and all of its villainous crew. Indy is able to avoid becoming octopus chow by lassoing the struts of a passing plane. A plane that happens to be flown by Amelia Earhart, who is in the middle of becoming the first person to complete a solo flight from Hawaii to California. In May of that year, Indy reunites with his buddy Wuhan as they search for the fabled Black Pearl, known as the Heart of the Dragon in the video game Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. The Emperor's Tomb is one of the few Indy video games with its own original story. I don't want to give too many spoilers for a decently fun game, but there's of course ancient magic, ugly Nazi goons, a no-good death cult that's trying to summon a dragon, and it sets up the opening scene of our first cinematic checkpoint in this timeline.
But Indy, we were supposed to meet with Lao She to talk to him about that Nurhachi job.
Shortly after Indy acquires that fancy little urn filled with Emperor dust, a young orphan tries to pick his pocket in Shanghai, and instead becomes Indiana's guide as well as his sidekick. I'm of course talking about Short Round.
Wow, holy smoke!
The movie gives us some background on where Shorty came from.
Shorty's family were killed when the Japanese bombed Shanghai. He's been living on the streets since he was 4. I caught him trying to pick my pocket.
But the novelization of Temple of Doom adds a little more to his story and mentions a trek through the Himalayas with Indy and Wuhan. And speaking of temples full of doom, we're now dropping into June of 1935 and all of its silliness in the 1984 film Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Back in Shanghai, China, Club Obi-Wan is absolutely bumping with the giant Busby Berkeley performance of the Cole Porter song Anything Goes, performed by songstress and human air raid siren Wilhelmina Willie Scott.
Anything goes.
It's crazy it took Spielberg so long to make a full-on musical with his version of West Side Story, which is a modern masterpiece that none of you saw in theaters. You blew it. Mad at all of you. Anyways, after the rousing number at the club, Indy sits down across from Lao She and his tactical sideburns. This meeting comes a day after Lao She's son tried to steal from Indiana.
You have insulted my son.
No, you've insulted me.
Lao trades the Eye of the Peacock diamond for the ashes of Nurhachi and slips Indy some poison into his martini because he's a big old piece of shit.
What's that?
Antidote.
To what?
The poison you just drank, Dr. Jones.
Indy and Wuhan have the drop on the triad, which lasts about 3 seconds, and we sadly say goodbye to Wu.
Into the great unknown mystery. I go first, Indy.
Chen gets some nasty heartburn, and this cigarette girl catches a stray from Indy as he tries to wrangle the antidote while also sending the club's insurance rates through the roof. Willie, Indy, and the antidote take the fastest exit out of the building, where Short Round is waiting for them.
Wow, holy smoke! Crash landing!
Short Round, step on it!
He speeds them through the streets of Shanghai and to the Nangtao airport, where Weber has gotten them a flight out of town. There's a lot in Temple of Doom that is weird or doesn't totally work within the film, but Dan Aykroyd's 30-second cameo is still one of the strangest things in the movie for me. Also a huge missed opportunity to not bring him back for Crystal Skull. What are we doing?
Thank you. Cheers. Drink responsibly.
Unfortunately for the trio, the plane Weber booked them on isn't headed for friendly skies.
Nice try, Lao She!
The flight from Shanghai gets bumpy when Lao She's pilots dump fuel and then themselves off the plane, which is super rude to whoever was waiting on that chicken delivery they're carrying. With the mountains rising up to meet them and no more parachutes, Indy puts their faith into the sturdiest emergency raft ever constructed.
Shorty! Get our stuff!
It was the 1930s. Things used to be built to last. You could probably shoot that raft with a harpoon gun. It would bounce right off it. Their jungle cruise downriver brings them to the Indian village of Mayapur, which is on really rough times when they show up. Rough times that were caused by the Maharaja and the no-goodniks who came down from Pankot Palace and stole the Shankara stones from Mayapur.
They came from palace and took Shivalinga from our village.
Along with the sacred stone, the thieves also came down and kidnapped every child from the village. With a mix of his love for adventure along with his moral code, Indy and company head to Pankot Palace on elephant back. Indy gives Willie a history lesson about Shankara, Shiva, and the sacred stones before they make their way to the gates of Pankot, where the vibes are absolutely horrid, and I'm not just talking about the menu. Indy's reputation precedes him, and they're welcomed to dinner with the young Maharaja by Prime Minister of Pankot, Chatur Lal.
My name is Indiana Jones.
Dr. Jones, the eminent archaeologist?
Hard to believe, isn't it?
During dinner, Indy meets Captain Blumbert of the British military, and they briefly discuss the mutiny of 1857.
It seems the British never forget the mutiny of 1857.
The Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the First War of Independence, was a very bloody and widespread revolution against British rule in India, specifically against the East India Trading Company, also known as one of the most evil entities in recorded history. The rebellion lasted from 1857 to 1858, and while it didn't free India from Britain's rule, it fortunately did dissolve the East India Trading Company out of existence. Indy is more interested in the history of the presence of the Thuggee.
You know perfectly well the Thuggee cult has been dead for nearly a century.
Who in real life were mostly just groups of different roving bandits, but gained a propagandized reputation as vaguely supernatural agents of death among colonizers.
The Thuggee was an obscenity that worshipped Kali with human sacrifices.
We also learn a little bit about what Dr. Jones has been getting up to in other parts of the world.
Wasn't it the Sultan of Madagascar who threatened to cut your head off if you ever returned to his country?
No, it wasn't my head.
Then your hands, perhaps.
Chhatarlal and the young Maharaja show that they have the worst poker faces of all time, and Indy has a chance to climb Mount Capshaw until it's ruined by a would-be assassin who falls victim to the strongest ceiling fan of all time. Like I said, sturdy craftsmanship. Indy finds a secret passage in Willie's guest suite, which has the same depiction of Shiva that the child returned to Maripur with. Indiana and Short Round almost become part of the decor of the dungeon, but are miraculously saved by Willie.
We are going to die!
After surviving the same trap for a second time, the trio sneak their way into the most impressive Spirit Halloween in South Asia. And they've got balcony seats for a super upsetting magic show that's being put on by High Priest Malaram, played by Bollywood legend Amrish Puri. They never really explained what the point of pulling out that guy's heart was. Like, yeah, it's a really cool trick that it lights on fire, but what's the end goal? Just having a bunch of burned hearts lying around the place? Seems wasteful. Mala and the Thuggee have 3 of the 5 Shankara stones, which is very bad news for anyone who isn't a worshipper of Kali. Indy takes the stones out of their decorative skull holder and discovers that the children of the village are being used as slave labor to try and dig up the 2 remaining magical rocks. The Army of Death cultists capture our favorite professor and force him to drink a turnpike shot, which causes him to slip into the black sleep of the Kali Ma, which is not as relaxing as it sounds. The hypno juice takes over Indy's mind as Willie is getting thrown in a grill basket and slow roasted over lava until Short Round is able to break the living nightmare with the power of friendship and second-degree burns.
Indy, I love you! Wake up, Indy!
The boys toss a bunch of flunkies into some lava, Chhatarlal gets Giles coreyed by a big old wheel, the trio help free the children from the nightmare mines, and we get some good old-fashioned Indiana punches. Just a whole lot of them. Things are looking up until the Maharaja, who is also under the thrall of the evil blood, breaks out his Krita doll, which isn't a real thing. Why an Indian character is using Haitian folklore is beyond me, but...
George knew about our interest in India. We had traveled in India and we were collecting Indian art and so forth.
We'll talk about it. Short Round saves Indy from his acupuncture just in time for him to turn the big lug into hot pressed juice, and he also snaps the Maharaja out of his trance by using the trusted technique of burning him. With Malaram and the Thuggee flooding the mines, our heroes Donkey Kong Country their way out of there in just an absolutely incredible sequence. Like, looking at this, you would never know that those are stop motion puppets. That's crazy.
Because most of that was done by ILM back in the States, shooting all the miniatures.
Indy ends up between magic rocks and a hard place as Malaram and his goons have them surrounded on a bridge with only one way out.
Malaram, prepare to meet Kali in hell. Oh! What are you doing?
The Thuggee are tossed to the crop of crocodiles that are waiting below, and Malaram tries to show Indy his heart-dripping trick up close. Some chanting and belief in the unbelievable activates the Shankara stones, which are a huge fire hazard, it turns out. Indy, Willie, and Shorty return to Mayapur victorious, with both the Shankara stones and all the children who were kidnapped by the cult. He might not have his fortune and glory, but he does finally get to make good on that makeout session that he missed back at Pankot Palace. It's a little weird to talk about Temple of Doom before Raiders for a few reasons. For example, this moment makes zero sense in regards to our timeline being before Indiana is hunting for the Ark, and it's not even the biggest problem. Temple is easily the weakest of the original 3 films. Some elements of it have obviously aged horribly even before the film was released. The Indian government banned production from even filming there due to the cartoonishly offensive depictions of the country.
Indians are very sensitive about
foreigners criticizing anything in their country.
Also, Willie Scott isn't the easiest hang, majority of the dialogue scenes move like molasses, and Indy's whole fortune and glory angle just doesn't really gel with what audiences knew about their favorite archaeologist. It's a real example of what happens when you give script responsibilities to the couple who would go on to write and direct Howard the Duck.
Oh, let's sit around just thinking the most horrible things you could think of, but it's done very tongue-in-cheek.
It also didn't help that the original 3 ideas that George Lucas had when he pitched Spielberg on the trilogy didn't really exist.
George said that if I did wind up directing the first one, that I would need to direct 3 of them. He said he had 3 stories in mind. It turned out George did not have 3 stories in mind. We had to make up all the other subsequent stories.
And to compound things further, George was going through a pretty dark time in his life, as Marcia Lucas was in the middle of divorcing him for the artist who installed the stained glass dome at the Skywalker Ranch Library, which is still there.
We decided to go darker. Part of it, I guess, I was going through a divorce at the time and I wasn't in a good mood.
All of that mixed with the fact that Spielberg was clearly out to lunch while directing this movie because he was too busy falling head over heels in love with Kate Capshaw.
So, Mr. Spielberg, how does it feel directing a musical?
Well, it feels just swell. Just swell.
All of that said, it's still a pretty fun time when it gets cooking. The special effects in this film are truly groundbreaking, the musical opening rules, and Short Round is easily the best kid sidekick ever put in a movie. That's a stone cold fact.
Cheat. Are you saying that I cheated?
Yes.
Can you prove I cheated?
Yes, I saw it.
After surviving all that doom, Indy and Willie go their separate ways. I can't imagine why. Short Round also goes missing from the timeline after this adventure, at least film-wise. They do have a few more adventures in the comics, which we'll get into a little bit later. In July of 1935, after leaving India, Indiana finds himself at the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. His discovery of the shrine draws the fascination of a bunch of rich mucky-mucks who keep going into the obviously cursed landmark to get turned into skeletons. The word forbidden is literally right in the temple's name. This is all part of the Indiana Jones adventure ride at Disneyland.
I've been waiting for you with your Disneyland passport.
There's a super fun TV special from 1995 about the park ride, which has an intro from former Disney president Michael Eisner, where he lays out some strange information about the temple.
You can now tour the Temple of the Forbidden Eye at Disneyland in Anaheim, California.
If we're sticking to kayfabe, that means the temple is real and that Disney paid for it to be brought to America and reconstructed into a theme park ride.
And since we put all of those in place, there's been a lot of strange things that have been happening.
The special also features Karen Allen and Jonathan Rhys-Davies dressed as their characters, but playing themselves, and also talking about Indiana Jones as if he's real. I think my nose is bleeding. I also really love how much Karen Allen clearly did not want to be part of this promotional video.
Don't just sit there with your mouths open. We're at the Indiana Jones adventure.
How do we get back to this kind of stuff? Honestly, TV specials tied to big grand openings of theme park rides, it's just such a good time.
Well, it's the wildest ride I've ever been on.
Our last stop in 1935 is in Connecticut at the fictional Marshall College, where Dr. Jones has become the new archaeology professor after leaving his position at Princeton, much to his father's chagrin, I assume. Okay, now that we're through those appetizers, it's time for some prime rib. In February of 1936, Dr. Jones is on a sabbatical from Marshall College and is taking in the sights and sounds of Peru in the 1981 masterpiece, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's exploring a Chacapoya temple with the help of some not-so-trustworthy guides. Indiana and Alfred Molina make their way through all the spiders, dart traps, and spike walls to come face to face with a fertility idol, which the Warriors of the Clouds were really intent on keeping. After snagging the idol, Indiana speedruns his way past the dart wall, set to pose corpse, and that boulder that we all love and adore. We love Boulder. Indy finds himself safely outside of the temple, and right in the lap of Jovito tribesmen, who have really solid comedic timing. It's also our first theatrical appearance of Renee Belloc on this timeline.
Again, we see there is nothing you can possess which I cannot take away.
Unfortunately, Belloc and his silver tongue have gotten to the Jovitos first, and Indiana has to make his way out of the jungle before he becomes a well-dressed pincushion. Thankfully, his pilot pal Jock Lindsay is right over the hill.
Jock! Start the engine!
Completely unrelated, but also kind of related to this, Jock was played by Fred Sorensen, who was a pilot that would be essential in flying the Jurassic Park crew to safety when a massive hurricane hit Kauai during production of that movie. Back at Marshall College, Indy has returned to teaching his class of starry-eyed students, who are definitely failing their final because they're too obsessed with their super hot teacher. And like, yeah, how could you not be? Get a load of that guy. Indiana isn't back on campus for long before Marcus informs him that Army intelligence is there to ask him a few questions. mainly about Abner Ravenwood and the Nazis he's babbling about in a correspondence that they intercepted.
Tanis development proceeding. Acquire headpiece, staff of Ra, Abner Ravenwood, U.S.
The Third Reich has managed to uncover the buried city of Tanis, one of the possible resting places of the Lost Ark, a chest that was used to carry the Ten Commandments, and a whole bunch of ghosts.
Good God. Yes, that's just what the Hebrews thought.
Impressed by his impassioned knowledge of the Ark, the army pays Indy's way to Cairo and agrees to let the museum have the fabled Lost Ark should Indiana recover it.
And the museum? The museum gets the Ark when we're finished.
Oh, yes.
No clue how I never noticed this painting of a bunch of topless ladies in Indy's study until what is probably my 30th rewatch of this movie. That's the second thing people see when they walk into his house. Wild. Anyway, Indiana packs the essentials while Marcus reflects on the haunting mysteries surrounding the Ark.
No one knows its secrets. It's like nothing you've ever gone after before.
He hops on a Pan Am flight to Nepal to meet with Abner and chat about the staff of Ra. And it's here we're officially introduced to the f***ing goat, Marion Ravenwood.
Indiana Jones. Always knew someday you'd come walking back through my door.
Marion has been stuck in Nepal for the past 10 years, and despite the snowy climate, her feelings about Indiana have not chilled out at all.
I learned to hate you in the last 10 years.
Indy's there to talk to Abner, who has unfortunately left the realm of the living.
Where's Abner?
Abner's dead.
Indiana is also looking for a bronze headpiece that Abner discovered some years back, and Marion is the only one who knows where it is. Indiana's not the only one after it though. Super creepy little Nazi wormman Arnold Todt and his goon squad show up after last call.
The bar's closed.
We are not thirsty.
Todt and company are terrible guests, but thankfully Indy didn't go too far.
Let her go.
And then we get served a delicious helping of punch sound effects from the Indiana buffet. Ben Burt has been operating at full power since 1975. Best sound designer to ever walk the earth, easily. Todt gets Kevin McAllister by the scalding hot medallion, which Marion yoinks as the bar is burning down around their ears.
Until I get back my $5,000, you're gonna get more than you bargained for! I'm your goddamn partner!
The duo fly to Cairo and meet up with Sala and a devious monkey spy. The Germans have hired Sala along with every excavator they can find in the hopes of discovering the Well of the Souls. And some guy named Baloche is there too.
Belloc.
Sala, like Marcus, is very uneasy about meddling with artifacts that were hidden for a reason.
The Ark. If it is there, Tanis, then it is something that man was not meant to disturb.
Indiana and Marion enjoy a nice stroll in the marketplace until that snitch monkey rats them out to the Hugo Boss boys and their gaggle of swordsmen. The two of them get separated in the hubbub of the marketplace, with Marion bonking guys on heads with frying pans and hiding in big baskets, while Indy is taking the easy way out of an exhausting situation. That piece of monkey rats on Marion once again, as she's tossed into the back of a truck with a Wile E. Coyote amount of explosives. A truck that goes up like a match the moment it turns on its side and takes Marion with it. Or so Indy thinks. Spoiler, kind of, not really. Indiana drowns his sorrows with some whiskey before he's brought in front of Belloc, who monologues about the balance of good and evil in the world of archaeology and his motivations to supersede the Fuhrer with the power of the Ark.
Jones, do you realize what the Ark is? It's a transmitter. It's a radio for speaking to God.
Sala's army of children intervene just in time to protect Indy from being turned into a Damien Hirst painting, and Sala takes Indiana to meet an expert on the staff of Ra, who reveals that the headpiece has additional staff instructions on the back, which is bad news for Belloc and the Nazis because
they're digging in the wrong place.
They then head to the absolutely ginormous dig site with a properly measured staff and a full headpiece that unveils the exact location of the Ark when the sun hits its mark. Indiana gets another win under his belt when he happens upon a very alive Marion, who he has to leave behind for now. Under cover of night and lightning storms, Sala and his men uncover the Well of Souls. The big scary Anubis statues are the least of their problems.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Indiana engages in some exposure therapy with a tomb full of asps, while Belloc attempts to get some information out of Marion with nice dresses and trying to drink her under the table, unaware that she has a liver made out of granite. Back under the sand, Indy and Sala uncover the resplendent Ark from its resting place, and they have absolutely terrible timing, as Belloc and the Krauts are early risers and ruin everyone's good time.
In 1,000 years, even you may be worth something.
Son of a bitch.
Marion gets hucked into the tomb with Indy and left for the snakes to handle, but our favorite professor uses his head and the head of a statue to make a way out of the tomb. All they gotta do is walk through Dead Guy Alley to freedom. Marion plugs some fascist full of lead, and Indy is getting tenderized by a big bald Nazi until he does his impression of those birds that tried to take down Sully Sullenberger. I also want to give a huge shout out to second unit director Mickey Moore, who directed the entire truck sequence.
Now from this, I'll get a point of view of the truck racing towards us, so we can cut from this to their point a little bit.
It's so expertly paced and storyboarded, and everything just flows so incredibly well from moment to moment. A set piece just filled with set pieces. Really mind-blowing filmmaking. Extraordinary stuff. After surviving 100 miles of rough road, Indy drives off with the Ark, and Sala gets him and Marion 2 tickets aboard the Bantu Wind with Captain Simona Katanga. Indy and Marion get some much-needed R&R. Meanwhile, totally normal things are happening with the Ark below deck. The unforgiving seas bring a German U-boat right to their cabin door. Katanga covers for Indy, who stows away on the sub that Marion and the Ark get loaded onto. The sub lands in a secret base near the island of Crete, where the long march to a ceremonial altar begins, and almost comes to an end when Indiana threatens to send the Ark back to God in pieces if Marion isn't set free.
Surely you don't think you can escape from this island?
It depends on how reasonable we're all willing to be. All I want is the girl.
Belloc unfortunately calls Indy's bluff, knowing that he could never destroy such an important piece of history. Indy and Marion are in the nosebleeds for the grand opening of the fabled Ark, which is filled with the dusty remains of the 10 Commandments and a bushel of spirits that aren't super stoked about being woken up. And then Spielberg is just cooking with the heat of 1,000 suns at this moment. Mwah. It's so good. So good. One more time. Fantastic. All right. The Ark cleans up after itself and is shipped back to the United States, where the American government pounces on it immediately, welching on their deal to let it be on display at the National Museum. Instead, the Ark is locked up tight and being studied by the military's top men.
Who? Top men.
Indy might not have the Ark, but he's got something much better waiting for him outside.
I don't know what they've got there.
Well, I know what I've got here. Come on. Buy a drink.
The couple head off into their future together as the Ark is packed up and stored away in Hangar 51 in Nevada, never to be seen again. Until 1957. It's so hard to talk about Raiders because there's just so much to unpack from its inception to its production. It's hard to think of another film that is so textbook perfect in every single aspect. The cast, the action, the script, just everything. I think a big part of that being is that Spielberg was in desperate need of a hit since he was coming off his first major bomb, his only straight-up comedy film, 1941. A movie with a few Raiders connections going on, including Tim Matheson, who was on the short list of actors to play Indiana Jones.
I've learned to hate you in these last 10 years.
Both movies also share the same submarine prop, and the gag where Toth shows up in Cairo with his coat hanger was originally filmed with Christopher Lee for 1941, but was cut from both versions of the movie.
Jesus, pal, I mean, a Nazi!
I highly recommend getting your hands on any kind of special features you can track down. Even after all these years, everything about this film is the definition about the magic of movies.
They've given us a reason to date the find as we have.
Indy and Marion's adventures aren't over just yet, though. They've got a whole bunch of really bizarre shit to get into in the Marvel Comics series, The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones, which was published between 1982 and 1985, following the release of Raiders. Now, I'm not going to break down this section of the timeline comic by comic, mainly because nobody wants to hear me explain the plots to 34 different comic issues. We'd be here all day, and this video is already crazy long. The majority of the adventures feature Indy and Marion, but there's other familiar faces like Sala, Jock, Marcus, and Katanga, who saves Indiana from a crab-related death in one issue. Some other highlights include Indy and Marion search for her father Abner Ravenwood, but they find a Minotaur instead. We also learn that Short Round gets sent to a private boarding school in America on Indy's dime. There's plenty of fascists getting goopified by horrible curses, and Jones and Marion run afoul of Albert Toth's equally evil sister Ilsa, who is different from other blonde Nazi lady Elsa, who we'll meet in a little bit. I've also got a really big gripe. Issue 30 ends with the promise of next, Bigfoot. I rushed to issue 31, you know what's not there? Bigfoot. Not a single one. The f are we doing? The years listed in these comics are not as concrete as they are in the Dark Horse comics, but they seem to mostly take place from 1936 to 1937. And speaking of 1937, this is where a few things between different pieces of media start to overlap on each other and makes the chronology of the timeline feel a bit convoluted. The specific events at this juncture being the Dark Horse comic Indiana Jones and the Arms of Gold, and the video game Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which we're about to get into. I'm going to throw up a spoiler warning here because unlike the majority of the films, games, and books that we're pulling from, the Great Circle hasn't had as long of a shelf life. So if you haven't played the game yet and you want to avoid spoilers, go ahead and jump to this time code.
This American music is astounding.
Alright, the big reason I'm starting with the Great Circle is because the game starts after Indy and his fear of commitment have broken off his engagement to Marion, unaware that they've gone halves on a baby like Method Man used to say. After Mutt enters into the world, Marion goes ahead and marries British Air Force pilot Colin Williams.
You married him? I introduced you!
Their marriage came to a sad ending, however, when Williams was killed in action in World War II. A distraught Marion and her son were taken in by Indy's old college pal, Harold Oxley.
My dad died in the war. Ox kind of helped my mom raise me.
Dr. Jones and his cold feet are back to teaching at Marshall College, which gets a visit from a giant Tony Todd, who steals a cat mummy from the school's exhibit, but leaves behind a medallion that's connected to the Vatican Secret Archive. That's where they keep all those saucy photos of Pope John Paul II and blueprints for ancient flying machines. No, seriously. Indy follows his nose to Vatican City, which is just crawling with Mussolini's black shirts, just lousy with them. Jones discovers that the Italians are working with mediocre archaeologist and cringe lord Emmerich Voss, who is digging for a collection of powerful stones. Indiana is unexpectedly joined by reporter Gina Lombardi, who is investigating the disappearance of her archaeologist sister, which Voss is also involved in.
Where is Laura?
You should be asking yourself who is Laura.
Tell me why you have taken my sister.
Their investigation brings them to a Nazi dig site in Giza, where they learn that the big guy from earlier is part of an order of giants referred to as the Nephilim. They've been working hard for thousands of years to keep the Great Circle and its power a secret. The titular Great Circle refers to an invisible line that bisects the equator and marks the position of 17 different ancient landmarks and archaeological sites.
The Great Circle is the biggest mystery in all of archaeology. Do you even know what it is?
Including the pyramids of Giza, the Nazca lines in Peru, those big old noggins down on Easter Island, and the ziggurat of Ur. It's in Iraq where our trio of Indy, Gina, and Locus end up, as the Nazis have discovered Noah's Ark buried deep below the earth, which houses an ancient ark that is capable of teleporting things of tremendous size to anywhere in the world instantaneously. This also completely clashes with what we learned in the Genesis Deluge story, when Indiana buries Noah's Ark under an avalanche, which seems odd for the game to do because the game includes deep cuts to Indiana Jones lore within it, so it seems just odd that they kind of snagged this story and redid it. The whole grand discovery goes south for Voss, who gets the treatment that all Nazis deserve, which is being punched in the face a bunch of times before getting turned into beef jerky by a god laser. Locus, being the mensch that he is, sacrifices himself to keep the power of the stones and the Great Circle a secret from the rest of the world. Gina, recognizing how deeply on the rebound Indiana is, gives him a goodbye kiss on the cheek and hops on a plane back to her life as the shadow of World War II begins to loom over the planet more and more. The lovelorn Indiana isn't lonely for long though. He jets off to New Delhi to engage in some retail therapy, where he buys an antique Shiva statue from a woman with a jealous, degenerate husband before he returns to Barnett College. Of all the constantly conflicting dates, events, and adventures in this universe, Indy's school of employment is almost constantly shifting. Sometimes he's teaching at Marshall College, sometimes he's at Barnett, and Marcus appears to be the dean at both of them. The fictional colleges would only be about 35 minutes away from each other by car, so maybe he's an adjunct at Barnett. I don't know, you find me a better explanation. After returning to academia, he's quickly caught up in a new treasure hunt with Professor Francisca Uribe, who has a lead on where to find the golden armor of Pachacute, an Incan emperor who ruled during the 1400s and ordered the construction of Machu Picchu. The Ultimate Guide lists the events of the Golden Arms adventure as happening in January and February of 1938, but I can't come across that date anywhere in the comics, so we're just going to go with who can really remember anyway for this point on the timeline. I can tell you what for sure happened in 1938 though. In March of 1938, Indiana is somewhere off the coast of Portugal, catching right hooks and retrieving the Cross of Coronado that was pilfered by Panama Hat 24 years ago.
This is the second time I've had to reclaim my property from you.
That belongs in a museum.
So do you!
Panama Hat goes up like the Waterworld stunt show, and Indiana inner tubes back to Barnett College, where a whole bunch of ungraded thesis papers and anxious students are waiting for him.
And I'll see each and every one of them in turn.
Also waiting for him are some shadowy men on a shadowy planet who approach Indy and help escort him to a glitzy Manhattan penthouse, which is the home of Walter I'm Totally Not Evil Donovan.
Well, like yourself, Dr. Jones, I have a passion for antiquities.
Walt's got a big old stone slab covered in Latin, which he thinks might be of interest to Indiana.
Where the cup that holds the blood of Jesus Christ resides forever.
Donovan is very excited about eternal life, like most super rich guys are. So much so, he's tracked down a manuscript that tells the tale of two Grail Knights who lived beyond 150 years.
This is the manuscript in which the friar chronicled the knight's story. It doesn't reveal the location of the Grail, I'm afraid.
And the cherry on top of all of it is that one of Donovan's experts believes to have located the resting place of one of those crazy old knights
within the city of Venice, Italy.
I love the way Julian Glover says Venice, Italy. It's so funny.
So I did this terrible phony interview with a ghastly American accent. It was awful. And I got it.
Venice, Italy.
Walter needs Indy's help to pick up the trail that his previous project leader started before he went missing.
Why don't you try my father?
We already have. Your father is the man who's disappeared.
Henry Sr.'s house has been ransacked, but thankfully he mailed his diary with all of his Grail notes back to Indiana. Indy, with Marcus in tow for some reason, head to Venice,
Italy,
and are greeted by Henry Sr.'s assistant, Dr. Schneider.
I knew it was you. You have your father's eyes.
And my mother's ears. But the rest belongs to you.
She brings the fellas to the most divine library in Europe, do some unrepented damage to the floor, and find themselves a petroleum river along with a bunch of dead guys and just so many rats. Just so many.
In order to have rats that aren't infected with some virus or disease, you have to basically cultivate them. So our animal handlers gave birth to something like 2,000 living rats.
The dangerously hot duo find the coffin of Grail Knight number 3 and his shield, which gives them a hint as to where the almighty cup is. This whole time our heroes have been tracked by the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, and they are not letting up. And then we're treated to one of the best things in movies, which is Harrison Ford doing action in a suit. He's one of the best. You got Patriot Games, Air Force One, Clear and Present Danger, Witness, Working Girl, the list is endless. Indiana saves the life of Qasim, who is a brother of the previously mentioned Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, which is tasked with keeping the secret and location of the Grail safe.
The Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword have been prepared to do anything to keep it safe.
Qasim tells Indy that his dad is being held hostage at Castle Brunwald on the Austro-German border. A big creepy castle in the mountains of Germany in 1938 can mean only one thing.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
Indy's plan to find his father is a smashing success.
Junior?
The Nazis have scooped up Henry Sr. to get their hands on his Grail diary, which is why he mailed it back to Indy in the first place.
Do you think my son would be that stupid that he would bring my diary all the way back here?
After taking out some trash, Indy catches a cold dose of reality when Elsa reveals her big secret that she's a Nazi. Not to say like obviously, but obviously. It's a secret that Henry Sr. knew because he and his son share more than just a first name.
How did you know she was a Nazi?
She talks in her sleep.
Pink Squidward reveals himself to be the mastermind behind this whole big gotcha, but his smugness quickly dips when he discovers a page containing a map with no names has been torn out of the diary.
He's given them to Marcus Brody.
With any luck, he's got the Grail already.
Does anyone here speak English?
Sala finds Marcus before the bad guys do for about 30 seconds, before Marcus gets bamboozled into the back of a truck that's taking him straight into the heart of the action. Father and son get declared enemies of Germany, and also almost go up in smoke before they do some Charlie Chaplin bits on their way out of the castle. This movie is such a blast. One of those films that's just got you grinning from ear to ear the whole runtime. Love it. After teaching some crowds about American road rage, Indy and his father have a little venting session about the Grail that's been percolating for almost 2 decades.
This is an obsession, Dad. I never understood it.
Neither did Mom.
They motor to Berlin to retrieve the diary from Elsa, who is watching firsthand the destructive ideology she's chosen to align herself with. A disguised Indy yoinks back the diary and accidentally gets pulled into the worst parade ever and ends up face to face with this lazy-faced Jagov and his stupid little mustache. The Jones boys board a Zeppelin out of Deutschland and almost get pinched by the SS before takeoff. Thankfully, Indy knows how to handle this kind of problem.
No ticket.
On their very long flight, Henry Sr. teaches Indy about the Grail and continues his undisputed reign as the king of deflecting blame for not being the best father in the world.
If you'd been an ordinary average father like the other guys' dads, you'd have understood that.
Actually, I was a wonderful father.
Also, the Zeppelin finally gets word that those dastardly Americans are on board and turns around. Indy does his best to remember his flight training from Gail Parker during a dogfight that his dad is not helping with.
Son, I'm sorry. They got us.
After a rocky landing, to say the least, the two steal a ride and head to the beach, and this shot is just so impressive. Wow. Douglas Slocum doesn't really get the credit he deserved for being such an incredible DP, just doing fantastic stuff behind the camera in all of these films. After a bunch of close calls, Henry Sr. solves their fighter plane problem by becoming the Teddy Roosevelt of seagulls. Walter Donovan, with Marcus as his hostage, schmoozes with the king of the temporary Republic of Hatay and secures a crop of tanks and trucks to take them across the desert to the Grail.
We're well out of range.
What can I say about the tank sequence that hasn't already been said 100 times over? The whole thing works like a fine Swiss watch, and the spatial geography of the scene is masterful. And I've always loved Indiana's little stinker laugh right at this moment.
Not that Jones, the other Jones!
Sala saves Henry Sr. from the doomed tank before it heads off a cliff, and Indiana goes with it. Or so he thinks. Connery really puts some mustard on this right here. Oh, it's hard not to cry.
I thought I'd lost you, boy.
The Jones crew make their way through the Canyon of the Crescent Moon and to the Temple of the Sun, where Donovan and the Nazis have discovered a really cool hallway that makes severed heads. The group of large adult men are quickly captured, and Donovan gets Indiana to brave the dangers of the temple with a little bit of convincing.
Shooting me won't get you anywhere.
You know something, Dr. Jones? You're absolutely right.
Indy remembers his history lesson from the blimp, along with his Latin to avoid giant blades, and takes a leap of faith to make it across the bridge to interrupt the last Grail Knight's reading time. Dude's only got that one book to read for 700 years. There's not even like a cracked magazine or a Guinness World Records book. Rough stuff. Walter and Elsa show up to take a look at the collection of cups that can kill you. Elsa, aiming to redeem her soul in some way, gets one over on Donovan by handing him the wrong chalice, which turns water into skeleton juice. Donovan really should have researched Henry Sr.'s journal more closely, or he could have just turned the cup around to find out who it belonged to. Not that hard. Indy makes the educated choice and uses the power of the Grail to save his father, who gets to see his decades of research, mockery, and neglect of his family pay off. Elsa can't contain her excitement and tries to cross the sacred seal of the temple with the Grail in hand, which is like the #1 rule about the Grail.
But the Grail cannot pass beyond the Great Seal.
You were in a room with a 700-year-old guy who warned you about an evil chalice that turned your boss into a Halloween decoration, but he's bluffing about the sacred seal. Okay. Elsa's lust for money and eternal life gets the better of her, and Indy's love for trying to impress his father almost gets him, until Connery leaves not a dry eye in the theater.
Indiana. Indiana. Let it go.
The collapsing temple buries the Grail and the Super Chill Knight for the rest of time, before the four of them ride off into the sunset. While the quest for the Grail is the last cinematic adventure we see Indiana take on before we meet him again in 1957, there's a lot that happens to him both on and off screen. mostly off. In July of 1938, Henry Mutt Ravenwood Jones III is born into the world and will lose his father, who stepped up in just a couple of years.
My dad was an RAF pilot. He was a war hero, not some school teacher.
No, sweetheart.
The Dark Horse comic Indiana Jones and the Spear of Destiny picks up exactly where we left off, with Indy and company riding home after leaving the Grail Knight to clean up their mess, and Henry Sr. regrets that he was too weak to stay behind and become the new guardian of the Grail. We'll circle back around to this comic and its events in just a little bit. And in October of 1938, Indiana reunites with Sophia Hapgood as she believes she has found the original writings and precepts of Buddha. And would you have guessed it that the Lost Covenant of Buddha contains a mystical power? Because of course it does. The Empire of Japan, which was already brutally invading other Asian countries during this point in time, is desperate to harness the fabled power, which leads to a chase across Asia, Afghanistan, and all the way to Shangri-La. All of this is in the 6-issue adventure Indiana Jones: Thunder in the Orient. We don't hear from Indy again until 1939, when the main events of Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings takes place. That game is, I'll say, not great. All you really need to know is that Indiana is searching for his long-missing professor, Charles Jacob Kingston, and comes across his old colleague Magnus Voller, who has gone full crazy and is on the hunt for Moses' staff. From Nepal to the North Atlantic, Indiana is aboard a ship with a crew of criminals in the adventure Indiana Jones and the Sargasso Pirates. In that story, World War II has officially started, as noted by the mysterious femme fatale Cairo, which puts us sometime in the month of September, since Germany invaded Poland on September 1st of 1939. Jones gets stranded on an iceberg with pirate Bill Lawton, where the two discover an axe that belonged to Leif Erikson, and of course it has a treasure map etched into it. This leads Indy to meet the Sargasso Pirates, and he becomes the tour guide for a group of unsavory crooks like Conman New Jersey Jones and the Sea Witch. She is the captain of the said pirates, who has the ability to summon krakens and looks like David Bowie during his Halloween Jack era. Indiana reunites with Sophia Hapgood in May of 1939 in New York City, where she's rubbing elbows with socialites and is presenting herself as some form of psychic. To stop those pesky Gestapo from finding the hidden power of Atlantis, Sophia and Jones team up to take them down in the conclusion of Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. According to the Ultimate Guide, 1939 is also when Indiana meets George Mac McHale, an agent for MI6 who will become Indiana's spy partner after he joins the OSS in December of 1939, following England and France's declaration of war against Germany.
He was MI6 when I was in OSS. We did 30 missions together in Europe and the Pacific.
In 1941, while advising an American archaeological expedition in Greece, a Nazi raid ruins the whole dig, and Indiana starts being pursued by an ancient cult once again for a mystical knife, which he is in possession of. This adventure is chronicled in the comic Indiana Jones and the Golden Fleece. In June of that year, Indy hears rumors that there's a valley of gold somewhere in the Bolivian Amazon, and decides to go see for himself. His journey to find the legendary city, though, is a complete failure, and he almost dies from typhus.
Francisco de Orellana disappeared into the Amazon looking for it in 1546. I almost died of typhus looking for it myself.
2 years later, in 1943, Indy and Mac are on the hunt for a fabled black pearl known as the Heart of Darkness in the jungles of Haiti, in the book Indiana Jones and the Army of the Dead, written by Steve Perry. Not that Steve Perry. Of course, there's also Nazis hunting for the same pearl, as well as Japanese soldiers, and there's an army of zombies. This book is really only being mentioned because it includes Mac.
Well, we've been through worse.
Yeah, when?
In 1944, Indiana finds himself once again tied to a chair and in peril inside of a German castle.
What did you come here for?
We got a lot of nice stuff.
The pathetic pack of fascists have swiped the Spear of Longinus from Indiana, and this is where we first meet Nazi scientist Jürgen Voller, who is a different Voller from Magnus Voller, who we meet in Staff of Kings. There's too many Vollers! Indy's execution is put on hold thanks to a timely bomb drop from the Allies, and he makes his way aboard the plunder train to rescue his diminutive associate, Professor Basil Shaw.
Indy? Baz? You're alive!
So far.
Aboard the choo-choo, Jones learns that the spear is a fake, but the massive amounts of stolen treasure the Nazis are hauling isn't. Professor Creepy reveals that the real path to power lies fully in assembling the rest of the Antikythera, an ancient dial built by Archimedes. Aboard the money train, Indy does his thing and defeats a bunch of Nazis, and swipes Jurgen's half of the dial before he gets a face full of pull at about 80 miles per hour. It's not the best phrasing, but okay. A year later, Indiana and Henry Sr. come across the Spear of Destiny in caves in Ireland in March of 1945, a different magical spear from the Spear of Longinus. In 1947, Indiana and Sophia, now working for the CIA, have their last adventure together in Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. Sophia asks for Indiana's help to figure out what the Soviets are looking for under the ruins of Babylon. I've never played this game, honestly, mainly because I didn't grow up with a Nintendo 64. My parents got me a Virtual Boy instead, which is not the same. But if you played it for too long, you couldn't see red for a while. God knows what that did to my eyes. In July of 1947, Indiana Jones is black-bagged by the United States government and is brought to Roswell, New Mexico to take a look at some strange bits of debris and possibly a being from another world.
And shown what? Pieces of wreckage in an intensely magnetic shroud covering mutilated remains?
Judging by his tone, it doesn't sound like Dr. Jones was asked to be part of Project Blue Book just 5 years later.
None of us was ever given the full picture. And we were threatened with treason if we ever talked about it. So you tell me, what was in the box?
In 1950, Indy is in snowy Wyoming with his pal Grey Cloud as they're being chased down by some trigger-happy thieves.
This is not as you said it would be, Dr. Jones.
I got a taxi, didn't I?
Yes, but for how long?
After some car trouble, Indy and Grey Cloud continue on foot and hide out in a cabin to wait out a snowstorm. It turns out the crooks are after a ceremonial peace pipe that Indy stole back for Grey Cloud.
This is probably the most sacred relic of my people's past.
Indiana finds a soprano sax in the cabin and regales his pal with tales of his jazzy adventures back in Chicago 30 years ago.
Reminds me of working my way through the University of Chicago.
You planned that?
No, I was a waiter.
The bad guys eventually find the cabin, but they don't get super far with the peace pipe. Also, is this like the best Harrison Ford has ever looked? Crazy hot. In 1951, Indiana lands in England and hosts a one-man intervention for Basil Shaw, who has gone way too deep down the Archimedes rabbit hole.
Archimedes discovered a temporal meteorology.
Archimedes was a mathematician, Baz, not a magician.
Basil is convinced that the dial can predict fissures in time, and after Indy shakes some sense into him, he realizes the grip the dial has had on his entire existence. Indiana takes Basil's half of the device off his hands and promises to destroy it, which he doesn't do.
If I give you this, it must be destroyed.
I will.
Instead, he throws it in a filing cabinet. That same year, we sadly say goodbye to Henry Jones Sr. as he goes off to heaven to be reunited with Anna. At least I assume, given the whole God is real revelations we keep seeing through these films. Marcus Brody follows right behind Henry Sr. and leaves this mortal coil in 1952.
Brutal couple of years, huh, Charlie? First Dad, then Marcus.
Things are pretty quiet for the next 5 years until Indiana is tossed in the trunk of a car in 1957. In the Nevada desert in 1957, a caravan of soldiers are getting challenged to some drag racing before they infiltrate Hangar 51. But these aren't just any double-crossing soldiers.
Russians.
Indiana and his World War II compatriot Mac have been scooped up by the Ruskies and brought to the super-secret military base under the orders of Colonel Dr. Irina Spalko, who claims to have been gifted or cursed with psychic abilities since childhood.
Because I know things. I know them before anyone else.
I'm calling bullshit on all this psychic stuff because if that were true, then wouldn't have happened. She's brought Indy to the warehouse full of government secrets to find one specific box, and it's not the one containing the Mothman's laser weapon, but the remains of the Roswell incident that Dr. Jones was privy to a decade ago. They follow the gunpowder path to the highly magnetized steel coffin and the hermetically sealed charred hot dog man that's kept inside. Unfortunately for Jones, Mac's priorities have changed over the years, and he's become a villain of the proletariat.
Why, Mac?
Well, what can I say, Jonesy? I'm a capitalist.
As he usually does, Indy improvises an exit out of the warehouse full of Russians.
You got it, pal.
I know it's not the strongest of the films, but watching this as my first Indiana Jones movie in a theater, I had like the biggest smile on my face. A little less after the first 30 minutes, but still, Spielberg just hitting frozen ropes all over the place in this opening.
Damn, I thought that was closer.
After a jet car ride deep into the Nevada desert, Indy wanders his way into Doomtown at the absolute worst time possible.
Oh, that can't be good.
This nuclear test gives us an idea when exactly we might be in 1957. Between May 28th and October 7th of that year, the United States was conducting nuclear tests in the Nevada desert under the title Operation Plum Bob. 29 different nuclear tests to be exact.
Conducted by the Atomic Energy Commission to further our weapons development program.
With time running out before 0 hour, Indiana puts his faith in the fine craftsmanship of King Cool refrigerators and their lead lining to survive the incoming hellfire. I know a lot of people hate this scene, but after all of the adventures I've seen him go on, you know what, I think you survive it, yeah. Why not? After getting a scrub down, Indy gets grilled by some G-men over his friendship with Mac, what the deal with the alien carcasses, and Jones learns more about Dr. Spalko and her specific field of scientific studies.
She was Stalin's fair-haired girl. His favorite scientist, if you can call psychic research science.
Now, there's never been super hard evidence that Stalin and his military scientists were experimenting with creating psychic agents to use in the field. But CIA documents that were cleared for release in the year 2000 point to Soviet attempts to make parapsychology and telepathy a weapon. But take all this with a huge grain of salt, especially when pretty much everyone who passed through the doors of Langley during this time in the 50s was walking around with a head full of government LSD. Sidney Gottlieb, the chemist who was leading the MK-Ultra project for the CIA, was just dosing agents and people around the office with acid like it was some kind of prank. A sci-fi science experiment the Russians did try to pull off though, and failed, thankfully, was when Russian biologist Ilya Ivanov tried to create chimp-human hybrids named Human Z, which mainly resulted in just a ton of dead apes. Jones heads back stateside to Marshall College, where he's greeted by the Dean of Students, Charles Stanforth, who comes bearing bad news.
What?
The FBI isn't finished with Jones and ransacks Indy's office under suspicion of him being a communist. The whole fiasco leads him to being on indefinite leave of absence from the university.
Indefinite leave of absence.
You are firing
During
me.
which they've agreed to continue to pay your full salary for
I
a
don't
period.
want their money.
Indiana almost makes it out of Connecticut before he has some train chat with Mutt Williams about the fate of their old friend Harold Oxley.
What about him?
You're gonna kill him.
The whole time during my rewatch of this movie, I kept thinking how much of a 5-star masterpiece it would be if Mutt Williams was replaced by Wally Brando.
I came to pay my respects to my godfather.
Indy learns from Mutt that 6 months prior, Oxley wrote to him and his mother that he discovered a crystal skull and that he was headed to Akator with it, which is another name for the mythical golden city of El Dorado, a city that Indiana tried to find at one point of his life but failed. The letters from Oxley and Marion turn out to be part of the KGB's plan to find Indiana, who helps start a turf war between some preps and greasers.
Get that greaser!
My favorite thing about the motorcycle chase, aside from how good it is that Indiana students finally get to see him be in adventure mode for the first time.
Want to be a good archaeologist? You gotta get out of the library!
Indy deciphers the riddle that Oxley left him in Mayan, which directs them down to Nazca, Peru, where Mac's slimy ass is hanging out. The dog boys investigate Oxley's wall scribblings and learn that he's found the gravesite of missing conquistador Francisco de Orellana, a gravesite that's crawling with members of the Black Parade, which gives Indy the chance to show off the rest of his resume.
You're a teacher?
Part-time.
Yes, I used the trailer audio. Under the ruins of the cemetery, they discover Orellana and his men, who have been preserved like haunted Iberico ham, and Oxley made an effort to return to the gravesite and leave the crystal skull behind for unknown reasons. The Russians are waiting for Indy and Mutt when they come up for air and bring them deep into the Amazon, where Spalko is doing her own alien autopsy on that tall guy that crashed in Corona, New Mexico a decade ago. The Roswell incident actually happened near Mac Brazel's ranch in Corona, New Mexico, but Roswell got the credit because Mac didn't own a phone and had to drive all the way to Roswell to call the sheriff. Anyway, Spalko waxes about the legend that returning the crystal skull to Akator releases some kind of incredible power, and plans to use it as a means of expanding the supernatural powers of Stalin's army.
We will be everywhere at once, more powerful than a whisper, invading your dreams, thinking your thoughts for you while you sleep.
The American government probably wasn't interested in the crystal skull at this point in time because Eisenhower was already having meetings with Venusian Valiant Thor, who was living at the Pentagon. Allegedly. She also surprises Indy with a very alive and totally with it Harold Oxley, who has become a living divining rod that points towards the lost city. Spalko also plays the ace up her sleeve to get Indiana to agree to being their guide.
Rotten, rusky son of a bitch! Indiana Jones.
Ford and Allen are so great together. We really should have gotten like a dozen movies with just the two of them. Just nuclear levels of chemistry. Their escape attempt from the Russian camp gets stuck in the mud, and the Jones family gets tossed in the back of a truck where they have a family therapy session for the first time.
You're not my dad, okay?
You bet I am, and I got news for you. You're gonna go back and finish school.
Again, a way better movie if this is Wally Brando instead of Mutt.
I've decided to let them do what they wish with my childhood bedroom.
Father and son bond over kicking a Soviet in the face, and we get a fast pass for the Jones family jungle adventure ride. It's honestly a pretty great set piece. I don't really remember why I didn't like it back in 2008. Right. Right, that's why. After all the monkey shines, fire ants, and waterfalls, the sopping wet quintet arrive at Akator, where they meet the welcoming committee, who have been waiting around a few hundred years for new visitors. With Mac's deceitful ass leaving a trail behind for the Russians, the party travels into the depths of Akator, with its many paintings depicting the quote-unquote gods that visited centuries ago and left behind a trove of treasures that were collected from all across the globe.
Collectors. They are archaeologists.
It turns out the gods didn't go far, as they were waiting for the return of the one who was lost. Spalko clearly hasn't had the same experiences that Indy has had when it comes to ancient artifacts you find buried under the earth.
Belief, Dr. Jones, is a gift you have yet to receive.
Oh, I believe, sister. That's why I'm down here.
Irina, like an absolute dunce, reunites the skull with the rest of its crystalline skeleton, and the whole final number gets underway.
It wants to give us a gift.
The 13 Longboys fuse back into one being as their ship starts its engines for the first time since Christopher Columbus's arrest, and they show Spalko what it feels like to be on the internet in 2026.
Enough!
All of our favorites, not including Mac, manage to make it out of the temple before the visitors return to their home planet, or in this case,
Not into space. Into the space between spaces.
After returning home from the Amazon, everything is as it should be. Indy is promoted to Associate Dean of Marshall College, Oxley's back to normal, and after 20 years, he finally puts a ring on Marion's finger.
You may kiss your bride.
It only took him multiple decades and multiple proposals to multiple women, but Indiana finally gets to settle down with his true love and their new life together for at least 10 years. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is such an odd duck in this franchise because it constantly sways back and forth between feeling like an Indiana Jones movie and something entirely different. I do think there is way more good stuff in this movie than bad, but the bad just happens to be really, really loud. I can't really rag on this movie when it's got so much to appreciate in it. I also just love seeing the whole indie team back together and having a good time.
Here's looking at you kids.
I think the biggest thing hamstringing this film is that it came at a time when Spielberg was really leaning into the advancements in CGI and motion capture a bit too much. I'm looking at you, Mutt's digital head. All in all though, how can you be mad at this face? Seriously. There's a 12-year gap where we don't see hat nor hide of Indiana Jones. No video games, comic books, or literary adventures to speak of. Really missed the opportunity to have Indy experience Beatlemania or steal Walt Disney's Frozen head. Indy's promise to commit to a life with Marion seems to have held strong until America got involved in the Vietnam War. Like his father before him, Mutt decides to enlist in the military to piss off his dad after the two had a huge disagreement. Unlike his father though, Mutt returns home to the United States in a casket. Mutt's death devastates Indy and Marion, causing the couple to split for an unknown amount of time, and Indiana is handling it super well. We pick up with Old Man Jones in New York City on August 13th, 1969, which is the same day as a massive parade for the Apollo 11 astronauts after their successful trip to the moon.
It's Moon Day, Mr. Jones.
Moon Day. Indiana is now teaching at Hunter College, the first non-fictional university on his resume, and it's also his last day in academia as he's finally retiring. Apparently his time as Associate Dean at Marshall didn't last super long because he's been teaching at Hunter now for at least a decade.
For over a decade now, our colleague Dr. Jones has been a loyal servant of Hunter.
The student body isn't nearly as enthralled by Professor Jones like his former classes were, but thankfully Helena Shaw, Basil's daughter, is hanging out in the back of class to answer questions about old Archimedes and his wacky time discs.
Come on, guys, this is on the final.
Archimedes.
Archimedes.
Helena, dressed like a Dr. Whomst, is there to talk with Indy about the Antikythera.
Sealed in wax was a clock-like mechanism, finely tooled, purpose unknown.
Jones warns her about how her father became obsessed with studying it before handing it over to Jones to destroy it back in 1951, which he never did. While Indy and his goddaughter are digging through the college archives, Jürgen Wahler, somehow with all of his head and face intact, is in New York City with his henchmen Clabber and Hawk and their CIA liaison, Agent Mason, no first name. The CIA has been working with Wahler for the last 4 years on trying to track down the Antikythera. And if you're wondering why the CIA is helping a former Nazi / still a Nazi track down a mystical artifact, it's because Wahler was essential in the journey to the moon.
Well, the man you're serving, he's the one who put those astronauts on the moon. Built the rockets they rode.
Following the end of World War II, there were a lot of German rocket scientists and engineers just loitering around. In an effort to keep them from immigrating to the Soviet Union or other neutral European nations, President Truman signed off on a secret directive known as Operation Paperclip. This is simplifying it a great deal, but the American government basically snatched up 1,000 or so German scientists after the war and put them to work in the US of A, mainly at NASA, with a good crop of those scientists being pretty fervent Nazis. The big fish of them all was aerospace engineer Wernher von Braun, who could be seen here talking to JFK at NASA, or here in this Disney-produced TV special about space travel.
Now here's a model I designed for a 4-stage orbital rocket ship.
I'm bringing all of this up because Voller is a more absurdist analog for von Braun.
He was also overall director of the development of the original V-2 rocket.
My quarry will be waiting for me for an update on his V-1 rocket.
Jones and Helena retrieve the dial half of the device from the college archives as Voller's thugs show up, pop 2 members of the registrar, and hunt down Indy and Shaw. Helena, who has become an antiquities smuggler since last time she saw Indy, runs off with the dial to auction it off on the black market. Jones gets framed for the murder of his 2 colleagues, forcing him to escape through the Apollo parade on horseback. Indy almost gets ratted out by this jabroni until he learns what happens to snitches.
No, hey, go home, pal. You're
This
drunk.
is the guy! It's the killer!
Sorry I'm late, Indy.
Sala is there to mainly draw some exposition on Indiana, and lets him know that Helena is likely selling the dial in Tangier.
This week, the hotel is hosting its annual auction of stolen antiquities.
Jones arrives in town and gets held up by aviation enthusiast Teddy, who is the short round to Helena's Indy.
Private auction, old-timer.
Same, tried to pickpocket me, origin and everything.
He tried to steal my purse outside a casino in Marrakesh when he was 10.
I caught him trying to pick my pocket. Didn't I, short stuff?
The auction full of colorful crooks gets grumbled by Indiana, and then totally ruined by the Voller bunch as it devolves into a tuk-tuk chase through the streets of Morocco. Voller's follies lead to the CIA disavowing him, but he and his cohorts are, surprise, not the most trustworthy people in the world. In order to find the Graphicos... Did I talk about the Graphicos? The Graphicos is a map that points the way to the other half of the dial. And to find that, Jones, Helena, and Teddy follow Voller to Greece, where Indy's pearl diving pal Rennie and his boat are hanging out.
Indy!
Using Basil's research to guide them, they dive deep down into the wrecked ship and brave a buttload of eels to retrieve the Graphicos tablet. Things turn sour up on the surface when Voller arrives and murders Ronaldo's crew, and eventually Ronaldo when Indiana refuses to translate the Polybius bead code that's inscribed on the tablet.
I know this stuff backwards.
No!
Helena buys them some time while she reveals that the second half of the dial is in Alexandria, a place that Indy has some history with.
No, we do not!
The crew make an explosive escape and head to Sicily and sneak inside the ear of Dionysus. And this is honestly my favorite stuff in the movie. Just Indy and Helena solving puzzles in an ancient tomb. Teddy isn't around. It's a pretty good time. Sorry to that young man, but get out of my face. They find Archimedes lying around with the dial's second half in one hand and some sleek-looking wristwear on the other.
Clocks won't be invented for 1,000 years.
Kaiser Killjoy slithers in and captures Indiana after putting one in his shoulder. Voller then reveals to Indy that he and his gaggle of mouth-breathing LARPers intend to time travel back to 1939 to assassinate Hitler and turn the tides of World War II.
What kind of Nazi kills a Führer?
The kind that believes in victory.
Helena stows away on the plane full of fascists that's on a direct course to a big old glorious hole in the sky. Should probably rephrase that. While approaching the time fissure, Jones has a realization that nobody else managed to consider before putting this whole plan into action.
Archimedes didn't know about continental drift. He couldn't have.
I do love that so much of this part of the movie is just Indy roasting Voller, just scorching his ass.
Hey, Voller.
Your calculations are wrong!
Hey, Voller.
Will you shut up?
Indy's guess is correct, and the plane does arrive in Sicily, but about 2,000 years too early.
Those are Roman triremes.
The armies at the siege of Syracuse are understandably freaking the f*** out over the gigantic flying, fire-spewing nightmares and start trying to kill the beasts.
What are you doing, you idiots? They think we're a monster! Ah!
Archimedes, on the other hand, seems pretty nonplussed by the whole experience, almost like he knew this was going to happen. The armies shoot down Voller's plane as Jones and Helena take the last parachute out of Dodge, just before the burning tube of metal crashes into the earth. In the wreckage of the plane, Archimedes comes across the dial from the future, and Archie also helps himself to Voller's wristwatch. Yeah, good, that guy. Jones and Helena learn from Archimedes that he created the dial to bring allies from the future through fissures that lead only to 214 BC to save Syracuse and lift the siege.
It's a forced deck. It doesn't take us anywhere but here.
He built it to get help.
So it's kind of like a Terminator situation or Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
You are dealing with the oddity of time travel with the greatest of ease.
Seeing history literally playing out in front of his eyes, the wounded Jones wants to remain behind, feeling he has nothing left to return to in the present. Helena rightfully has a fear of time paradoxes and gives the stubborn old goat a knuckle sandwich.
I need to do this.
Me too.
Indiana wakes up in his bed in 1969, where Helena's been keeping an eye on him during his recovery, but she's not the only one. The two of them are seriously fully incapable of not having chemistry together. It's insane. The couple that was always meant to be are together once more, and this is where we leave them as they look to the future. And that's where it ends! A thrilling global adventure across space, time, history, and every curse that the gods could come up with.
He chose poorly.
It does seem like Dr. Jones has settled nicely into his retirement finally, but if the call to put on the fedora ever returns, I'll be the first one to buy a ticket. But honestly, let's let Harrison Ford just enjoy his golden years, please. Please, I'm asking, begging.
Dun, dun, da, da. The goat is back.
Oh, and here's that treat I promised you at the beginning of the video, which is Harrison Ford talking glowingly about rats.
Actually, I mean, they have personalities, rats do, compared to snakes.
But tell me, what do you think? What's your favorite adventure in the long life of Indiana Jones? Is there anything that I missed? And what do you think the future holds, if anything, for the world's hottest archaeology professor? Let us know in the comments below. Please give that like button a click if you'd be so kind. And for more non-stop archaeological action and adventure, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.